Hello, I'm Arthur Reed. Welcome to the World War II History Channel, where we explore the pivotal moments and untold stories of the greatest generation. In the soft light of a morning that had not yet decided what kind of day it would become, an envelope rested on the kitchen table, its corner touched by a beam of sun that slipped between the curtains like a quiet visitor. You stepped inside from the porch, the screen door closing with its familiar soft click, and the smell of warm bread still lingered in the air. The envelope waited there on the worn wood, plain at first glance, yet the way it lay made the whole room feel a little stiller, as if the morning itself had paused to watch. Your mother stood at the stove, her back to you, moving a spoon through something that no longer needed stirring. Your father sat in his chair by the window, the newspaper open on his lap, though his eyes had not moved across the lines for some time. You pulled out your chair and sat down. The wood felt cool against your hands, the same coolness it had held every morning before this one. For a long moment you simply looked at the envelope. The handwriting on the front was neat and steady, the kind that belonged to no one you knew from town. When you finally reached for it, your fingers moved slowly, giving the light one last chance to stay exactly as it was. The paper made a small, dry sound as you opened it, like a page turning in a book you had not chosen to read. Inside, the words were few. They asked you to come, to leave the fields that rolled out beyond the fence, to leave the porch where the swing still creaked in the breeze, to leave the road that led down to the creek where the water ran clear over the stones. You read the words once, then again, letting each line settle somewhere behind your ribs. The room did not change, yet everything inside it felt as though it had shifted by the smallest degree, the way a table might tilt when one leg is lifted and set down again in a new place. Across from you, your mother turned. She did not speak. Her hands, which had been busy all morning, now rested on the edge of the counter, the cloth of her apron still between her fingers. In her eyes there was a look that had not been there at breakfast, a softness that held both pride and the beginning of a distance you could already feel. She wiped her hands on the apron even though they were clean, then came to stand beside your chair. Her hand rested on your shoulder, the warmth of it the same warmth it had always carried when you were small and had come in from the yard with dirt on your knees. She did not press or hold too tightly. She simply let her palm stay there, steady and quiet, as if to say that whatever the envelope had brought, this part of home would remain. Your father folded the newspaper with care, lining up the edges the way he always did when something important was happening without being spoken. He set it on the table and rose, crossing the few steps to stand near the window. He did not clear his throat or offer the kind of advice that fills stories. He only looked at you, and in that look was the same quiet strength that had taught you how to mend a fence when the wire broke or how to watch the sky when the clouds gathered low. His nod was small, almost nothing at all, yet it carried everything he could not shape into words. You thought then of the girl who lived 2 houses down the road. You thought of the way her hair caught the light when she leaned over the garden fence to hand you a handful of beans she had picked that morning. You thought of the last evening you had walked with her to the edge of the fields, how she had tucked a small white flower into the pocket of your shirt without explaining why. The thought did not come with hurry or fear. It came with a gentle ache, the kind that sits softly and does not demand to be named. You wondered if the road that now waited for you would still lead back to the same place where she stood waving when the sun went down, or if the world beyond the last familiar fence would change the shape of everything you carried inside. The kitchen stayed quiet. The clock on the wall kept its steady, unhurried tick, the same sound it had made through every ordinary breakfast and every ordinary evening. Outside, a bird called once from the tree near the fence, and the sound drifted in through the open window like a reminder that some rhythms would continue even when you were not there to hear them. You folded the letter again, fitting the creases back into the places they had already made, and slipped it into the pocket of your shirt. The paper felt warm there, as though it had taken some of the morning sun with it and was keeping it close against your chest. You stood and walked to the door. The screen creaked its familiar note as you pushed it open, and the light outside seemed brighter than it had a few minutes earlier, the way light sometimes does when something inside you has shifted. The path that led from the house to the road looked unchanged, the same dust, the same faint tracks from the morning's coming and going. Yet as you stepped onto it, the dust felt different under your feet, as if it already knew the steps you would take from now on would carry a different weight. You turned once and looked back at the kitchen window. Your mother stood there, her figure small against the light inside, and she raised one hand in a gesture that was not quite a wave and not quite anything else, but something in between that held all the words she did not need to speak. It is in rooms like this one, with sunlight still warm on the table and the smell of bread still in the air, that the longest and quietest journeys often begin. The courage asked of you that morning was not the kind that runs ahead or raises its voice. It was the courage to open an envelope, to meet your mother's eyes across the room, to carry the weight of leaving without letting it push aside the small kindnesses that had shaped the person you were. Many years later, when the road had taken you far and brought you home again, you would remember the way the light fell across that table and the way your mother's hand had rested on your shoulder, and you would understand that this was where your strength had first learned the shape it would need to keep. If the story of that morning moved something quiet inside you, and you wish to honor the gentle courage of those early departures and the personal sacrifices they asked of ordinary lives, you might find comfort in looking at some of the World War II memorabilia that still carries the feeling of those times, or perhaps in watching the movie Midway, which you can find on Prime. It offers a way to see the era through respectful eyes and to keep the memory of such moments close. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. And so the morning continued, the sun climbing higher above the fields, the envelope now resting in your pocket like a small, folded promise you would carry with you. The house stood behind you, unchanged in its familiar lines and the creak of its screen door, yet you walked the path with a new quietness inside, the same path you had walked 1,000 times before, now leading toward a future that had only just begun to reveal itself in the soft light of that kitchen where an envelope had waited beneath the morning sun. The wheels of the train begin their slow, steady turn beneath you, carrying the familiar station platform farther away with every turn, while your mother's handkerchief still moves in the air like a small white flag you are not yet ready to lose. You find a place on the wooden bench inside the crowded car, your bag resting against your knees, the same bag that held the clothes your mother folded so carefully the night before. The air inside smells of wool coats and metal and the faint trace of tobacco from someone's pocket. Other young men sit close, their shoulders touching in the narrow space, their faces turned toward the windows or toward their own hands folded in their laps. No one speaks loudly. The only sounds are the low murmur of the engine and the occasional shift of a boot against the floor as the train finds its rhythm. Outside the window the town slips past in pieces. You see the edge of the field where you walked last Sunday, the fence line you mended with your father last spring, the roof of the house 2 doors down where she lives. Each thing appears for a moment and then is gone, replaced by another fence, another tree, another stretch of road that looks like every road you have ever known and yet already feels different because you are seeing it from a moving train. Your chest holds a quiet ache, the kind that does not shout but simply sits there, heavy and steady, like a stone placed gently on a table. The man sitting across from you shifts his bag to make room for someone else who has just found a seat. He is young, like you, with a face still carrying the softness of home. He glances your way once, then again, and offers a small nod, the kind that says he understands the weight of the same envelope you both received. After a while he reaches into his coat and pulls out a small photograph, the edges worn from being held too often. He holds it out so you can see. In the picture a girl stands beside a porch swing, her hand raised in a wave that looks almost like the one you left behind. He does not say her name. He only looks at the picture for a moment longer before slipping it back into his pocket, and in that silence something small and important passes between you. You think of your own photograph, the one you placed carefully in the inside pocket of your shirt before leaving the kitchen. You do not take it out. Instead, you rest your hand over the place where it lies, feeling the faint warmth of your own body keeping it safe. The ache in your chest moves a little, like water finding a new path around a stone. You wonder if she is still standing at the edge of her garden, watching the same sky you are watching now through the train window, or if she has already turned back toward the house to begin the long work of waiting. The man beside you offers a cigarette without speaking. You take it, and when he lights it, the small flame flares for a moment in the dim light of the car before settling into a steady glow. You pass it back after one slow draw, and he nods again. Neither of you needs to say what the cigarette is for. It is simply something to hold, something to share, something that makes the space between your shoulders and his feel a little less empty. Across the aisle, another young man pulls a folded letter from his pocket and reads it once more, his lips moving over words he already knows by heart. When he finishes, he folds it carefully, the way you folded the letter from the kitchen table, and tucks it away again as if it were a living thing that needed protecting. The wheels keep their steady rhythm beneath the floor. The sound is almost like a lullaby now, a low and constant song that rises and falls with the motion of the train. Outside, the fields give way to low hills, and the light changes as the sun moves higher. You watch a single tree on a distant ridge stand still while the train carries you past it, and for a moment you imagine that tree is watching you leave, the way your mother watched from the kitchen window. The ache deepens with each mile, yet it is eased a little by the sound of breathing around you, by the way the man across from you has begun to lean back against the bench as if the train's motion has finally allowed his shoulders to rest. Someone at the far end of the car passes a canteen down the row. When it reaches you, you take a small sip of the water that tastes faintly of metal and the morning's dust. You hand it to the man beside you without being asked. He accepts it with the same small nod, drinks, and passes it on. In that simple chain of hands and water something like a beginning forms, not loud or sudden, but quiet and necessary, the first thread of the brotherhood that will be needed for whatever waits at the end of the rails. You think of the letter you will write when the train stops for the night. You think of the words you will choose to tell your mother that the wheels turn steadily and that the man across from you showed you a photograph of his girl. You think of the words you will not write, the ones that live in the quiet space behind your ribs where the ache still sits. Those words will stay folded inside you for now, carried along with the photograph and the memory of the kitchen table and the way the sunlight touched the envelope. The landscape outside continues to change, the hills growing steeper, the towns appearing and disappearing with the same gentle rhythm as the wheels. In each passing place you see ordinary life continuing, a woman hanging laundry on a line, a boy running alongside a dog, an old man sitting on a porch with a pipe. These glimpses last only seconds, yet each one settles into you like another small stone in the quiet collection you are carrying. The train does not stop for them. It only carries you forward, the wheels turning, the car swaying, the men around you breathing in the same steady pattern as the engine. It is in moments like these, when the wheels carry you away from everything known and the ache of leaving sits quietly beside strangers who are slowly becoming companions, that the raw truth of departure lives most clearly. The private fears and the small kindnesses that ease them, the photographs held in careful hands and the cigarettes shared without words, these are the unfiltered human parts of the journey that stay with you long after the train has reached its destination. If you feel the weight of that quiet ache and wish to see the unfiltered human emotions of departure and the long journey in a way the main story cannot fully show, you might find value in the digital collection of raw, uncensored images and videos available through Gumroad. They offer a deeper, more intimate look at the private moments that shaped so many lives during those years. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The train continues its steady motion through the changing light. The man across from you has closed his eyes, though his hand still rests near the pocket where the photograph waits. The canteen has made its slow way back to the far end of the car. Outside the window the hills keep sliding past, and inside your chest the ache remains, softened now by the small threads of connection that have already begun to form in the shared silence of the moving car. The wheels turn, the miles accumulate, and the story of leaving home moves forward one gentle turn at a time, carrying you toward whatever waits beyond the last familiar ridge. The new boots feel heavy on your feet as you stand in the dust of the training ground, their leather still stiff against ankles that have known only soft ground and familiar paths until now. You take a step and then another, the boots creaking with each movement like something waking up slowly. Around you other young men do the same, their shoulders slightly hunched, their arms swinging in ways that do not yet match the rhythm the instructors ask for. The dust rises in small clouds around your ankles and settles again on the leather, turning the new shine into something softer and more lived in. You glance at the man walking beside you. His boots look just as stiff, and when he catches your eye he offers the smallest of smiles, the kind that says he feels the same weight and the same uncertainty about how long it will take for these boots to feel like they belong to him. The days stretch long under the open sky. You march in lines that slowly learn to hold together, your left foot finding the same beat as the man in front and the man behind. At first the steps feel awkward, like a song you have heard but never tried to sing. Someone ahead stumbles on a loose stone, and without thinking you reach out a hand to steady him. He nods his thanks, and in that brief touch something passes between you, a small thread of borrowed strength that makes the next mile of marching feel a little lighter. The sun moves across the sky, and the dust clings to everything, to your boots, to your trousers, to the sweat on your forehead that you wipe away with the back of your hand. In the evenings you return to the long wooden barracks where rows of bunks stand like quiet sentinels. The air inside smells of canvas and soap and the faint trace of the day's dust that has followed you inside. You sit on the edge of your bunk and work at the laces of your boots, your fingers tired from the day's work. The man in the bunk across from you struggles with his own laces, which have become knotted from the dust and the sweat. Without being asked, you lean over and help loosen the knot, your fingers working slowly in the low light. He watches you for a moment and then says quietly, "Thank you," the words simple and enough. You nod and return to your own boots, the small act of kindness settling into the space between you like dust settling on the floor. At night the barracks grow dark except for the thin line of light that slips under the door from the outside. You lie on your back listening to the breathing of the men around you, some already asleep, some still shifting as they try to find a comfortable place for their sore shoulders. A small fear rises in you then, the gentle wondering about how long these days will last and what they are preparing you for, but it does not stay long. It is eased by the sound of the man in the next bunk turning over and whispering a small joke about the way everyone's boots squeaked in perfect unison that afternoon. A few quiet laughs move through the dark like ripples on still water, and the fear settles back down, replaced by the simple comfort of not being alone in the wondering. You think of the letter you wrote the evening before, the one you folded carefully and left on the table near the door to be collected in the morning. In it you told your mother about the boots and the dust and the way the man across from you had shared the last of his water when yours ran low during the long march. You did not write about the small fear that comes at night. Instead you wrote about the way the lines of men were learning to move together, how a hand reached out without being asked, how a quiet laugh in the dark made the barracks feel less empty. Those were the things you wanted her to hold on to while she waited. The next morning the boots feel a little less stiff when you pull them on. The leather has begun to take the shape of your feet, and the creaking has softened into something more familiar. You stand and test the weight, and the man across from you does the same. He adjusts the strap on his pack where it has rubbed against his shoulder, and when he sees you watching he gestures for you to check your own. You do, and together you make the small corrections that will carry you through another day of marching. The dust rises again as the lines form, but now the steps fall into rhythm more quickly, the left foot and the right foot finding their place without as much thought. Someone ahead drops a canteen, and the man beside you picks it up and hands it back without breaking stride, the movement so natural it feels like something you have always known how to do. In the evenings the small kindnesses continue. Someone shares the last of a bar of soap when yours has worn thin. Another man lends a dry pair of socks when yours are still damp from the day's work. You accept these things with the same quiet nod you have learned to give and receive, and you offer what you can in return, a hand with a stuck buckle, A story about the creek near your home that makes someone smile in the fading light. The barracks at night hold the low sound of these exchanges, the rustle of canvas, the occasional soft laugh, the steady breathing that says you are all carrying the same tiredness and the same quiet resolve to keep going. The boots grow softer with each passing day, the leather molding to your steps, the dust becoming part of their color rather than something that clings from outside. You walk the training ground and feel the ground differently now, not as something foreign but as something you are learning to meet with steadier feet. The man who once stumbled ahead of you now walks with the same even pace, and when the line turns a corner he glances back once to make sure the man behind him has found his footing. These small acts of watching out for one another become the quiet backbone of the days, the borrowed strength that makes the long marches and the sore muscles feel less like something you face alone. You sit on your bunk one evening and unfold the letter that arrived that afternoon, the paper still carrying the faint smell of home. Your mother has written about the garden and the way the light falls on the kitchen table in the late afternoon. She has not asked about the boots or the marching. She has only said that she is proud of the way you are learning to stand with others. You read the words slowly, letting them settle in the same place where the small night fears sometimes rise, and the words push those fears a little farther away. You fold the letter again and place it under your pillow, where it will rest while you sleep, a small piece of home carried in the same space where your head lies. The days continue in their steady rhythm. The boots carry you across the dust and back again. The men around you become the quiet company that turns exhaustion into something shared rather than something borne alone. In the dark of the barracks, a hand reaches out to adjust a blanket that has slipped, or a voice offers a single word of encouragement when someone's step falters the next morning. These moments do not feel like heroism in the way stories sometimes tell it. They feel like the simple, necessary ways people keep one another moving when the road is long and the boots are still learning the shape of the feet that wear them. It is in these small acts of kindness shared in the dust and the dark of the barracks, the helping hands with stuck buckles and the quiet jokes that ease the tiredness, that the true strength of those days is found. The quiet resilience built not through grand effort but through borrowed strength passed from one man to another, day after day. If these stories of everyday brotherhood and the gentle ways people carried one another through the long training days have touched you, a small tip as low as $1 through Ko-Fi would help keep this deeply researched work of preserving such human moments alive for others who find comfort in them. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The boots continue to soften with each mile walked. The lines of men continue to find their rhythm more easily with each passing day. In the barracks at night the breathing grows steadier, the small kindnesses become habits rather than surprises, and the quiet strength you borrow from the man beside you becomes something you learn to offer in return. The dust settles on everything, but it no longer feels like something to be brushed away. It feels like part of the story you are all writing together, one steady step at a time, under the same sky that watches over the barracks and the training ground and the long road that still waits ahead. In the quiet hours after the day's marching has ended and the barracks have grown still, a single sheet of paper and a pen resting on your knee become the thin bridge that carries your thoughts back across the miles to the kitchen table you left behind. You sit on the edge of your bunk, the canvas sagging slightly under your weight, and smooth the paper with your palm. The surface feels cool and slightly rough against your skin, the kind of paper that has traveled far to reach this place. Around you other men do the same, some hunched over their own pages, some staring at the blank space as if the right words might rise from it if they wait long enough. The low light from the single bulb at the far end of the barracks casts long shadows across the floor, and the only sounds are the soft scratch of pens and the occasional rustle as someone turns a page or folds a finished letter. You dip the pen into the small bottle of ink and watch the dark liquid cling to the tip before it touches the paper and begins to form the first careful lines. You write to your mother first. Your hand moves slowly, describing the way the new boots have begun to soften and how the lines of men now move together without as much stumbling. You tell her about the man in the bunk across from you who shared the last of his water during the long march, and how the dust settles on everything but somehow feels less heavy when you are not the only one brushing it from your sleeves. You do not write about the small ache that still sits behind your ribs when the sun goes down. Instead, you write that the days are full and that you are learning to stand steady with others who are learning the same thing. The words come out simple and steady, the way you hope they will sound when she reads them at the kitchen table where the light still falls in the same pattern every afternoon. When you finish that letter, you fold it carefully, the creases lining up neatly under your fingers, and slip it into the envelope. You write her name and the address you know by heart on the front, the letters forming shapes that feel like home even as you sit far from it. Then you take out another sheet of paper. This one is for the girl who lives 2 houses down. Your hand pauses above the page for a moment before the first words come. You tell her about the way the training ground looks at dusk when the lines have finished marching and the dust has settled into a soft haze. You tell her that you think of the porch swing and the way the wind moves through the tall grass near the creek. You do not say how the miles feel longer at night or how the photograph you carry in your pocket sometimes feels heavier than the paper it is printed on. You write instead that you hope the garden is growing well and that the light still catches the flowers in the same way it did when you last walked with her along the fence line. The man in the next bunk is also writing. He has been quiet all evening, his pen moving in small, deliberate strokes. When he pauses to rest his hand, he glances over and sees you watching. He offers a small nod, the kind that has become familiar in these shared hours, and then returns to his page. A little later he tears a clean sheet from his own small stack and holds it out toward you without a word. You take it with the same quiet nod, grateful for the extra paper when your own supply has grown thin. In that simple exchange, something like a thread is drawn between you, thin as the paper itself but strong enough to hold for the moment. You continue writing. The ink flows steadily now, carrying descriptions of the barracks at night, the way the breathing of many men sounds like a single low rhythm when the lights are out, the way a quiet laugh sometimes moves through the dark and makes the space feel less empty. You write that you are well and that you think of home often, especially in the hours before sleep when the day's dust has been washed from your hands and the boots stand waiting by the bunk. The words feel like a small offering you are sending across the miles, a way of keeping the kitchen table and the porch and the garden present even as the training ground and the long lines of marching feet fill your days. When the letters are finished, you fold each one with the same careful attention, the creases sharp and the edges aligned. You address the envelope slowly, making sure every letter of every name and every street is clear. Then you place them together in a small stack on your knee, the paper still slightly warm from your hands. Across the barracks, the man who shared his paper is doing the same, his stack of finished letters resting beside him like a quiet pile of promises. Someone at the far end of the room begins to hum a tune so softly it is almost lost in the breathing of the others, and the sound drifts through the low light like a thread of its own, connecting the rows of bunks in a way that needs no words. The next day brings mail call, and you stand with the others in the open space between the barracks while names are called. Your own name comes, and you step forward to receive the envelope that has traveled the same miles you have, only in the opposite direction. The paper feels different in your hands now, softer from its journey, and when you open it the faint scent of home rises from the pages. Your mother has written about the garden and the way the light moves across the kitchen floor in the late afternoon. She has written that she reads your letters at the table where you used to sit, and that the words make the miles feel shorter for a little while. She has not asked for details of the training or the marching. She has only said that she is glad the boots are softening and that you are not alone in the dust. You read the letter slowly, letting each line settle before moving to the next. The man who shared his paper stands nearby reading his own letter, and when he looks up his eyes hold the same quiet relief that you feel. Later, when the day's work is done and you return to the barracks, you sit on your bunk and read the letter once more by the low light. The words about the garden and the kitchen table become a small bridge of their own, carrying you back for a few moments to the place where the envelope first rested in the morning sun. You fold this new letter carefully and place it under your pillow with the photograph, where it will rest while you sleep, a piece of home kept close in the same space where your head lies. In the days that follow, the writing and the reading become part of the rhythm of the barracks. You write when the light is low and the others are quiet around you. You receive letters and read them in the same careful way, letting the words ease the ache that sometimes rises when the sun goes down. The man across from you continues to share paper when your supply runs low, and you in turn pass along an extra envelope when he needs one. These small exchanges happen without ceremony, the way a hand reaches out to steady someone during a long march. They are the quiet ways the distance is crossed, not with grand gestures but with the steady offering of paper and ink in the words that carry what cannot be spoken aloud. You think sometimes of the letters that will come after this one, the ones that will travel even farther when the training ground is left behind. You wonder what words you will find then, and whether the paper will still feel like a bridge or whether the miles will stretch too far for even ink to cross. But for now the letters come and go, each one folded and carried and read in the low light of the barracks, each one a small act of keeping home alive while the boots grow softer and the lines of men move more steadily across the dust. It is in these quiet exchanges of paper and ink, these lifelines of words that carry hidden emotions and private longings across the miles, that the deepest connections of those days are kept alive. The intimate personal stories held in each folded page become threads that link the training ground back to the kitchens and gardens and porches left behind. If these stories of letters as bridges and the hidden emotions they carry have stayed with you, you might enjoy joining the Patreon community where free podcasts and raw unblurred video sections explore these intimate personal moments in greater depth, alongside a supportive group of fellow history lovers who cherish the quiet resilience found in such everyday acts of connection. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The paper continues to move between your hands and the hands of the men around you. The ink continues to form words that travel where boots and trains cannot yet reach. In the low light of the barracks, the stacks of finished letters grow and shrink with each mail call, and the ache behind your ribs finds a little more room to breathe each time a new envelope arrives carrying the scent of home and the steady reassurance that someone is still reading by the light that falls across the kitchen table in the late afternoon. The bridge of paper holds, thin and strong, carrying the quiet strength of connection forward one careful fold at a time. The gray horizon stretches where the sky meets the water in a single unbroken line, and the ship moves forward with a slow, steady roll that carries you farther from the land you know with each passing wave. You stand at the rail for a moment before the press of other men draws you back into the crowded spaces below. The air smells of salt and metal and the faint trace of fuel that clings to everything. Around you young men find places to sit or lean, their bags tucked close, their faces turned toward the narrow openings that let in the light and the endless view of water. The ship sways beneath your feet in a rhythm that feels new and old at the same time, like the breathing of something very large that has been moving across the ocean long before you stepped aboard. You find a narrow bunk in a long row of bunks, the canvas stretched tight, and you set your bag at the foot of it. The man in the bunk above you swings his legs over the edge and offers a small nod before lying back, his hands folded across his chest as if he is already trying to find a way to rest in this moving world. The days on the water blend one into the next. The horizon never changes, only the light that falls across it, sometimes soft and gray, sometimes bright enough to make the waves sparkle before they settle again into the same steady pattern. You walk the narrow decks when the space allows, your boots finding the same rhythm as the ship's motion, and you stand for a while watching the water rise and fall. In those moments the vastness of the ocean becomes a mirror for the quiet thoughts that move inside you. You think of the kitchen table and the way the morning light once touched the envelope. You think of the girl whose photograph rests in your pocket and the way her wave looked when the train pulled away. These thoughts do not come with urgency. They rise and settle like the waves themselves, gentle and persistent, a private ache that moves with the ship but does not grow louder. At night the spaces below deck grow dim, and the sound of many men breathing fills the air like a low, steady song. You lie in your bunk listening to the creak of the ship and the occasional soft cough or shift from the men around you. The man in the bunk next to yours turns on his side and speaks quietly into the dark. He tells you about the town he left and the way his mother always left a light in the window even when he was only walking home from a neighbor's house. His voice is low and steady, the kind of voice that does not ask for answers but simply offers the comfort of being heard. You listen and then you speak in the same quiet way, telling him about the fields that rolled away from the train window and the way the dust settled on your new boots during the long marches. The words come slowly, not because they are hard to find but because the darkness and the motion of the ship make everything feel slower and more careful. In these whispered conversations, the private fears that rise in the night find a place to rest. You do not name them directly. You speak instead of the hope that the road ahead will one day lead back to the same porch and the same kitchen table, and the man beside you nods in the dark as if he understands the shape of that hope without needing it explained. Small kindnesses appear in the narrow spaces between the bunks and along the decks. Someone passes a canteen down the row when the water runs low. Another man adjusts the blanket of the one who lies restless from the motion of the ship. You reach out once when the man above you drops his small book of photographs, and you hand it back without a word, the way hands have reached out for you during the marches and the long days in the dust. These gestures happen without ceremony, the way the waves continue to rise and fall without asking permission. They become part of the rhythm of the crossing, the quiet ways men keep one another steady when the horizon offers no landmarks and the only certainty is the steady roll of the ship beneath you. You think often of the letters you carried when you boarded. Some you have already read and folded again, their words kept close like small pieces of home. Others you have written in the stolen moments when the light is good enough and the motion of the ship allows your hand to move steadily across the paper. You write to your mother about the endless water and the way the men around you speak of home in the same careful voices you use. You write that the ship moves forward and that you are well, that the ache of leaving is eased a little by the shared stories that fill the nights. You do not write of the gray horizon that never changes or the way the ocean sometimes feels like a vast and patient mirror for every thought you carry. Those words stay folded inside you for now, carried along with the photograph and the memory of the kitchen light. The man in the next bunk shares a story one night about the last meal his family ate together before he left. He describes the way his father passed the bread without speaking and how his mother's hands rested on the table in the same way yours once rested on the envelope. His voice grows softer as he speaks, and when he finishes he is quiet for a long time. You do not fill the silence with words of your own. You simply let the story settle between you like the salt air that clings to everything. In that shared quiet, the private fears that sometimes rise with the darkness find less room to grow. They are eased not by answers but by the simple presence of another man who carries his own ache and still finds the strength to speak of home in the dark. The ship continues its slow progress across the water. The days pass in the same pattern of light and motion, and the nights bring the same low conversations and the same small kindnesses passed from hand to hand. You stand at the rail sometimes and watch the horizon, and you think of the way the training ground and the barracks now feel far behind you, not only in miles but in the shape of the life you are learning to carry. The ocean does not hurry. It simply moves, and the ship moves with it, and inside the crowded spaces below deck the men continue to speak of home and of the fragile hope that one day the gray line where sky meets water will be replaced by another shore and another road that leads back to the places they left. It is in these whispered conversations that rise in the dark and the small kindnesses shared across the narrow bunks, these private fears held gently and eased by the presence of others on the long crossing, that the quiet strength of the journey reveals itself most clearly. The hidden emotions and the everyday acts of connection become the threads that keep the heart steady when the horizon offers no end in sight. If the story of these private fears and whispered conversations on the open sea has moved something quiet inside you, you might find comfort in the free ebook The Shadow War, 5 Top Secret Operations That Shaped World War II, along with weekly deep dives into forgotten personal stories and hidden acts of quiet heroism that explore the inner lives of those who crossed such vast distances. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The ship keeps its steady course. The waves rise and fall in their patient rhythm, and the men in the bunks below continue to speak in low voices of the homes they carry in their thoughts and the small hopes they hold for the day when another shore will appear on the gray horizon. The paper of the letters you have written and received rests safe in your bag, and the photograph in your pocket stays close to your heart. In the moving darkness, the quiet resilience built through shared stories and gentle kindness becomes the steady thing that carries you forward, one slow roll of the ship at a time, toward whatever waits beyond the endless line where water meets sky. The ground beneath your boots feels different as you step onto the strange soil, the air carrying scents of earth and wood smoke and something green you have never known, while eyes both curious and kind turn toward you in the new light. You stand for a moment with the other men who have come off the ship, your bag resting against your leg, the weight of it familiar even as everything else has changed. The soil is darker here, richer in a way that makes the dust of the training ground seem far away. It gives slightly under your boots when you shift your weight, as if it is still deciding how it will receive these new footsteps. Around you the air moves differently, carrying the low sounds of voices that twist familiar words into shapes you do not yet understand. You breathe in slowly and let the newness settle, the way you have learned to let the motion of the ship settle into your bones. A small group of children stands at the edge of the path, their faces open and unafraid. One of them, a girl with dark hair and eyes that catch the light, steps forward and holds out a small bunch of wildflowers she has gathered. The stems are still damp from the morning, and when you take them the petals brush against your fingers with a softness that feels like a greeting. She does not speak, but her eyes hold a quiet welcome that needs no words. You nod to her, and in that small exchange something inside your chest loosens, the way a knot in a rope loosens when gentle hands work at it. The other children watch, and one of the boys offers a shy smile before they all turn and run back toward the low houses that stand near the trees. You walk with the others along the path that leads away from the water. The soil continues to feel different under your boots, and the air carries the scent of wood fires and fresh bread that drifts from somewhere nearby. Fellow soldiers walk beside you, men whose faces have become familiar through the long days on the ship and the earlier months of training. One of them, the man who once shared his paper for letters, falls into step with you. He does not speak at first. He simply walks, and the shared silence feels like another small anchor in this new place. After a while he says quietly that the light here falls differently on the trees, and you agree, the words simple and enough to mark that you are both seeing the same thing. In the days that follow, the strange soil becomes the ground you walk each morning and evening. You learn the way it holds water after rain and how it releases the scent of green things when the sun warms it. The voices around you remain unfamiliar, yet the eyes that meet yours often carry the same quiet kindness the children offered on the first day. An older woman pauses one morning as you pass her small garden and hands you a piece of bread still warm from her oven. She says something you do not understand, but her hand rests for a moment on your arm, and the touch carries the same steady warmth your mother's hand once carried on your shoulder in the kitchen. You thank her in the only way you can, with a nod and the small smile that has become your own quiet language here. You think often of the letters you carry. In the evenings, when the light is low and the others have settled, you take out the paper and write about the strange soil and the welcoming eyes. You describe the way the children ran with flowers and how the woman's bread tasted of home even though the hands that made it were not your mother's. You write that the ache of the long crossing has eased a little because these small kindnesses have begun to root you in the new place. You fold each letter carefully and place it with the others, knowing that when it reaches the kitchen table the words will carry a piece of this foreign light back to the people waiting. The man who walked beside you on the first day continues to share small observations. One evening he points to the way the light lingers on the horizon here longer than it did on the training ground, and you both stand for a while watching it fade. In these quiet moments, the private thoughts that sometimes rise in the new darkness find less room to grow heavy. They are eased by the presence of someone who sees the same unfamiliar things and still finds a way to speak of them gently. The bonds that began on the ship and in the barracks now stretch into this new soil, thin threads of shared noticing that make the foreignness feel less sharp. You find yourself pausing sometimes to look at the faces around you. The eyes of the local people, the eyes of the men who came across the water with you, all carry a quiet resilience that does not need to be named. A young boy helps carry a bundle of wood one afternoon when your arms are full, and when you try to thank him he simply smiles and runs ahead, his laughter drifting back like another small gift. These moments accumulate like the dust once accumulated on your boots, only now they settle into something warmer, something that feels like the beginning of belonging even in a place that is not yet home. In the low light of evening you sometimes sit with the letter you have been writing and read again the words your mother sent before the crossing. She wrote of the kitchen table and the way the light still falls there, and you write back that here the light falls differently, but that kindness still finds its way into open hands and open eyes. The paper becomes another bridge, thinner now across greater miles, yet strong enough to carry the small anchors you have found in this new land back to the place you left. The strange soil continues to receive your steps. The welcoming eyes continue to meet yours in the market paths and along the edges of fields. You learn the rhythm of this place not through maps or orders, but through the simple exchanges that happen when one person offers what they have and another receives it with gratitude. The man who shares your observations becomes someone whose quiet presence makes the unfamiliar evenings feel less empty. The children who first offered flowers sometimes wave when they see you pass, and the woman who gave bread nods as if she knows you are learning to stand steady here. It is in these small anchors of human kindness found in the eyes of children and strangers and fellow travelers on foreign soil, these gentle connections that ease the ache of new ground beneath your feet, that the quiet courage of beginning again reveals itself most clearly. If the story of these small anchors of human kindness in a new land has stayed with you, you might find comfort in looking at some of the World War II memorabilia that still carries the feeling of those times, or perhaps in watching the movie Midway, which you can find on Prime. It offers a way to honor the quiet courage and personal connections formed on foreign soil and to keep the memory of such moments close. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The soil beneath your boots continues to feel different, yet it no longer feels entirely strange. The eyes that meet yours continue to offer their quiet welcome, and the small kindnesses continue to root you in the new light. In the evenings when you write your letters or stand with the man who shares your observations, the foreign chapter begins to hold pieces of home alongside its own green scents and gentle faces. The bridge of connection grows stronger with each simple exchange, carrying you forward one quiet step at a time across the strange soil that has begun to know the shape of your boots. The sky above the foreign camp stretches wide and patient, holding the same slow clouds day after day while you wait in the quiet spaces between what has been and what is still to come. You rise each morning to the same low light filtering through the canvas of the tent, the ground beneath your boots already familiar from the many steps you have taken across it without going anywhere new. The air carries the scent of damp earth and wood smoke from the small fires that burn in the early hours, and the sky remains unchanged, a vast gray blue that seems to hold its breath along with everyone beneath it. You walk the paths between the tents and the supply piles, your boots leaving the same marks in the soil that others have left before you, and you feel the weight of the waiting settle into your shoulders like a coat you cannot quite take off. It is not a heavy weight that presses down all at once. It is a steady presence, the kind that sits quietly in the chest and asks nothing more than that you keep moving through the hours that do not seem to move at all. In these long stretches of stillness you find yourself returning often to the small things that still feel like home. You sit on the edge of a wooden crate outside your tent and unfold the letter that arrived the week before, the paper soft from being carried and read many times. Your mother's words describe the light in the kitchen and the way the garden has begun to green again, and you read them slowly, letting each line settle like a small stone placed gently in still water. The ache of separation rises for a moment, then eases as you fold the letter again and place it back in your pocket where it rests against your chest. Across from you, the man who shared his paper on the ship sits with his own letter open on his knees. He does not speak, but when he looks up his eyes hold the same quiet relief that yours do, and in that shared glance something like a thread is drawn between you once more. The waiting tests the spirit in ways the marching never did. There are no clear paths to follow, only the slow turning of the hours and the way the sky remains the same while your thoughts move in circles that always bring you back to the same questions without answers. You feel the private fear rise sometimes in the quiet of midday, a gentle wondering about how long this stillness will last and what will come after it ends. It does not shout or demand attention. It simply sits beside you like a companion you did not choose, and you learn to carry it without letting it fill the spaces where small kindnesses still grow. One afternoon, the man beside you offers half of the bread he has been given, breaking it without ceremony and handing you the larger piece with a small nod. You accept it in the same way, and the taste of it shared becomes something warmer than the bread itself, a reminder that even in the waiting you are not alone in the hunger or the stillness. In the evenings, the camp grows softer under the foreign skies. The light fades slowly, stretching the shadows across the ground in long, gentle lines, and men gather in small groups around the low fires or sit together on the crates and logs that serve as benches. Someone tells a quiet story about the town he left, his voice low and steady as he describes the way the rain sounded on the roof of his childhood home. Others listen without interrupting, their faces turned toward the fire or toward the darkening sky. You share a story of your own about the creek near your house and the way the water moved over the stones in the late summer light. The words come easily in this shared space, not because they are important but because they keep the thread of connection alive when the waiting threatens to pull everything into silence. A small laugh moves through the group when someone adds a gentle joke about the way everyone's boots have begun to look the same after so many miles, and the sound lifts the air for a moment before settling back into the comfortable quiet. You think often of the letters you have written during these patient days. In the stolen moments when the light is still good, you take out the paper and describe the sky that never seems to change and the way the small kindnesses of shared bread and quiet stories have become the anchors that hold you steady. You write that the waiting is long but that the men around you carry their own silences with the same quiet strength, and that together the hours feel less empty than they might alone. You fold each letter carefully and leave it with the others to be sent when the chance comes, knowing that the words will travel back to the kitchen table where someone waits and reads by the same light that once fell across the envelope on that first morning. The private fears that rise in the long afternoons do not disappear, but they grow smaller in the presence of these small comforts. When the man across from you shares a photograph from his pocket, the edges worn from many hands, you look at the faces of his family and feel the same warmth you felt when you first saw the flowers offered by the children on the strange soil. You pass the photograph back with a nod that says more than words could, and in that exchange the waiting becomes something you endure together rather than something each man faces in isolation. The sky above continues to stretch wide and patient, but beneath it the small acts of kindness and the shared silences create a different kind of shelter, one built not of canvas or wood but of the simple presence of others who understand the weight of the hours without needing to name it. As the days turn into weeks, the rhythm of the camp settles into your bones. You wake to the same light, walk the same paths, and return to the same small gatherings in the evenings where stories and bread and quiet laughter are passed from hand to hand. The private fears still rise, but they find less room to grow when there is always someone nearby who will share the silence or offer the larger piece of bread without being asked. The letters you write and receive become the thin bridges that connect this patient waiting to the home you carry inside you, and the eyes of the men around you become the quiet mirrors that reflect back the same endurance you are learning to hold. It is in these patient silences under the foreign skies and the small comforts shared in the long hours of waiting The gentle exchanges of bread and stories and photographs that keep the heart steady when time moves so slowly that the unfiltered human cost of endurance lives most clearly. If the quiet weight of these waiting days and the small kindnesses that ease them has touched something deep inside you, you might find value in the digital collection of raw, uncensored images and videos available through Gumroad. They offer a deeper, more intimate look at the private moments of endless waiting and quiet endurance that shaped so many lives during those years. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The sky continues to stretch wide above the camp, holding its patient clouds while the men beneath it move through the hours one small kindness at a time. You fold another letter and place it with the others, then sit with the man who shares your silences as the light fades once more. In the gathering dark the small comforts remain, and the waiting, though long, becomes something you carry together under the same unchanging sky. In the quiet hours before the distant thunder begins to roll across the hills, a small shadow settles in your chest, the kind that no amount of training can quite chase away. You sit with your back against the low earthen wall of the forward position, the ground cool beneath you even as the air holds the last warmth of the day. The sky above is the same foreign sky you have watched for weeks now, but tonight it feels lower, as if it too is listening for the sounds that have begun to drift from somewhere beyond the trees. The first rumbles are not loud. They come like the far-off rolling of heavy wagons on a distant road, a low vibration that moves through the earth and into your bones before fading again into the stillness. Around you the other men move with the same careful quiet, checking straps and settling their gear, their faces turned toward the darkening horizon or toward their own hands. No one speaks of what the sounds might mean. The words stay folded inside, the way letters are folded before they are sent home. You think of the kitchen table and the way the morning light once touched the envelope that changed everything. You think of the girl whose photograph rests in your pocket, her smile caught in a moment that now feels very far away. The private fear rises gently, not as a storm but as a slow tide that lifts the questions you have carried since the ship first moved across the gray water. What will the coming hours ask of you? Will the boots that have softened over so many miles still carry you when the ground turns rougher? These thoughts do not demand answers. They simply sit beside you in the growing dark, companions you have learned to acknowledge without letting them fill every space. The man who has walked beside you since the long marches sits close enough that your shoulders nearly touch. He is the same man who once shared his paper for letters and half of his bread during the patient waiting. Tonight he reaches into his coat and offers a cigarette without a word. You take it, and when he lights it the small flame flares briefly against the dusk before settling into a steady glow. You pass it back after a slow draw, and the shared smoke becomes another small thread between you, thin as the paper that once carried words across the miles. He does not ask what you are thinking. He simply sits with the same quiet presence that has eased the hours of waiting, and in that presence the shadow in your chest finds a little more room to breathe. You remember the letters you wrote during the long stillness under the foreign skies. In one of them you described the way the men around you had begun to feel like brothers, not because they spoke of courage, but because they shared the small things that made the waiting bearable. You wrote that the fear, when it came, was always lighter when someone else carried a piece of it without needing to be asked. Now, with the distant rumbles growing a little closer, those words feel like a promise you made to yourself as much as to the people waiting at home. You reach into your pocket and touch the photograph for a moment, the paper warm from your body, then let your hand fall back to the ground where it rests near the other man's boot. The first shadows of what is coming move across the hills like slow clouds. You hear the low voices of the squad checking one another's gear, the soft clink of metal against metal, the occasional quiet laugh that rises and fades like the smoke from the cigarette. Someone adjusts the strap on the man beside you's pack where it has begun to rub, his hands moving with the same steady care he might use on his own belongings. These small acts of looking after one another have become the everyday heroism of the waiting days, and now they stretch into the uncertain hours ahead. You find yourself watching the man next to you, not with the sharp attention of fear, but with the quiet determination that if the ground shifts beneath you both, you will reach out as he has reached for you so many times before. The private fear does not leave. It settles deeper into the spaces between your ribs, but it no longer feels like something you must carry alone. The man beside you shifts slightly and begins to speak in the low voice he uses when the night is long. He tells you about the last letter he received, how his sister wrote that the garden was already showing the first green shoots even though the calendar still said winter in her part of the world. He does not speak of the rumbles or of what might come with the morning light. He speaks instead of the ordinary things that still hold, the things that make the waiting and the watching feel like part of a larger story that began long before either of you stepped onto the strange soil. You listen, and when he finishes you offer a small story of your own about the creek near your home and the way the water always sounded the same no matter how far the road had taken you. The words are simple, but they draw another thread between you, another small kindness passed in the growing dark. Around you the squat settles into the same patient rhythm that marked the long days in camp. Someone passes a canteen down the line, and when it reaches you the water tastes of the metal and of the hands that have carried it before yours. You drink and pass it on, the gesture so natural now that it requires no thought. These moments of shared silence and shared small things become the quiet resilience that no amount of distant thunder can quite touch. The fear remains, but it is held between you and the man beside you, eased by the simple fact that neither of you faces the shadows alone. As the night deepens, the rumbles grow softer again, as if the hills themselves are holding their breath. You lean back against the earthen wall and close your eyes for a moment, letting the steady presence of the man next to you anchor you in the present. The photograph in your pocket, the letters folded and carried, the small kindnesses that have marked every step since the envelope first rested on the kitchen table, all of these become the gentle lights that push back against the darkness. You do not know what the next hours will ask, but you know that the man beside you will reach out if the ground shifts, just as you will reach for him. In moments when private fears are eased only by the steady presence of the man beside you, the quiet courage shared in silence and small kindnesses becomes the truest kind of strength. If these stories of quiet courage and the way shared fear finds comfort in the presence of a brother have touched you, a small tip as low as $1 through Ko-Fi would help keep this deeply researched work of preserving such human moments alive for others who find comfort in them. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The night continues its slow turning under the foreign sky. The distant rumbles fade into the stillness, and the man beside you remains close, his breathing steady in the dark. You sit with the same quiet presence he offers, the photograph warm against your chest and the small threads of connection holding steady even as the first shadows of battle begin to stretch across the hills. In the shared silence the private fear finds its place, not as something to be conquered but as something carried gently between brothers who have learned that the truest courage often looks like simply staying close when the ground begins to tremble. The rain falls without end across the distant hills, turning every path into a slow river of mud that pulls gently at your boots with each step forward, while the sky above remains the same soft gray that has wrapped the world for days. You move through the rugged slopes with the others, your pack settling heavier against your back as the water finds its way through every seam. The ground gives way beneath your feet in small, sucking sounds that mark the passing of hours rather than miles. Around you the hills rise in soft folds, their shapes blurred by the steady curtain of rain that has become the only constant in these long days. You keep your eyes on the back of the man ahead, watching the way his shoulders shift with each careful placement of his boots, and you match your steps to his without needing to speak. The rain drums lightly on your helmet and runs in thin streams down the front of your coat, cold but not sharp, a persistent presence that soaks through layers until your skin feels the dampness as a second skin. The man beside you has walked these hills with you since the first foreign soil. He is the same one who once shared his paper for letters and half his bread during the patient waiting. Now he reaches back without looking and adjusts the strap of your pack where it has begun to slip, his fingers quick and sure even in the wet. You nod your thanks, though he cannot see it through the rain, and the small gesture settles something in your chest. These quiet acts of looking after one another have become the rhythm of the days, as steady as the rain itself. When the path narrows and the mud grows deeper, he pauses just long enough for you to find your footing again, and you do the same for him when his boot catches on a hidden root. No words pass between you in these moments. The kindness lives in the simple staying close, in the shared burden of the wet and the weight and the endless forward motion. You think often of the letters folded in your pocket, the ones that carry the scent of home even after weeks in the damp. In the brief pauses when the squad rests against the slope, you sometimes take one out and read a few lines by the weak light that filters through the clouds. Your mother writes of the garden and the way the light still falls across the kitchen table in the late afternoon. You fold the paper again carefully, protecting it from the rain with your hand, and slip it back where it rests against your heart. The words become a small fire inside, a memory of dry warmth that pushes back against the chill that has settled into your bones. You do not write back often in these hills. The rain makes the paper soft and the ink run, but you carry the thoughts of what you would say, the quiet assurances that you are still moving forward, still sharing the small kindnesses that make the days bearable. The private fears come in the quiet stretches between steps, when the rain seems to speak in a language only the hills understand. You wonder how long the slopes will continue to rise and fall, how long the mud will pull at your legs before the ground grows firm again. These thoughts do not shout. They drift like the mist that clings to the trees, gentle and persistent, asking nothing more than to be acknowledged before they fade with the next careful step. The man beside you must feel them too, for sometimes he begins a slow story in a voice low enough that only you can hear. He speaks of the town he left and the way his father's hands looked when they worked the soil in spring. The story does not end with answers or promises. It simply unfolds like the rain itself, filling the space between you with ordinary things that still hold steady even here. You listen and offer a small memory of your own, the way the creek near your home sounded after a long rain, and the words become another thread that ties you both to something beyond the hills. As the day lengthens, the fatigue settles deeper, a quiet weight that lives in the shoulders and the small of the back. You keep moving because the man ahead keeps moving, and because the one beside you matches your pace without complaint. When someone slips on the slick slope ahead, hands reach out from several directions at once, steadying him before he falls far. The help is given without fanfare, the way water finds its path down the hill. You feel the same hands on your own arm when your boot sinks too deep, and you accept the lift with the same quiet gratitude. These moments of shared endurance become the everyday heroism of the rain-soaked days, not loud or grand but steady as the ground beneath your feet when it finally holds. In the late afternoon, the rain softens for a little while, and the squad finds a brief shelter under the low branches of a stand of trees. You sit with your back against the rough bark, the man beside you close enough that your shoulders touch. Someone passes a canteen, and you drink the cool water that tastes of metal and of the hands that have carried it. The small comfort spreads through your chest like the memory of dry socks or a warm meal, simple things that now feel like treasures. You close your eyes for a moment and let the rain on the leaves above sound like the gentle tapping you once heard on the kitchen window at home. The fear that sometimes rises in these hills feels smaller here, held at bay by the presence of the others who carry the same weight and the same quiet resolve to keep going. The rain returns as the light begins to fade, but the hills no longer feel quite so endless. You rise with the others and begin the slow descent toward whatever waits below, your boots finding the same careful rhythm. The man beside you walks in step, and when the mud pulls especially hard at your legs, he offers a low word of encouragement that needs no reply. You carry the letters in your pocket and the small kindnesses in your heart, the threads that connect this rain-soaked journey to the home you left and the home you hope to find again. The private fears remain, but they walk with you now as companions rather than burdens, eased by the steady presence of those who share the endless rain without needing to name it. In the quiet strength found when comrades share the burden of endless rain and mud without needing many words, the intimate stories of endurance become the deepest kind of connection. If these stories of shared struggle and the gentle strength that rises in the long, wet days have stayed with you, you might enjoy joining the Patreon community where free podcasts and raw unblurred video sections explore these intimate personal moments in greater depth, alongside a supportive group of fellow history lovers who cherish the quiet resilience found in such everyday endurance. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The rain continues its steady fall across the distant hills as you and the others move forward through the deepening dusk. Your boots leave fresh marks in the mud that will soon be washed away, yet the small threads of connection remain, tying each careful step to the ones before and the ones still to come. In the soft gray light that lingers between rain and darkness, the inner reserves you have found feel like a quiet light of their own, carried not alone but together with the man beside you and all the others who keep the same slow, steady rhythm through the endless rain. In the crowded staging areas where the night holds its breath, you sit with a single sheet of paper and let the words come slowly, carrying everything you cannot yet name into the quiet space between what has been and what is still to come. The air around you is thick with the low sounds of many men settling into the last hours before movement. Tents stand in long rows like quiet sentinels, their canvas sides moving gently in the breeze that carries the scent of damp earth and distant rain. You have walked through hills and waited under foreign skies, and now the ground beneath your boots feels different, as if it already knows the weight of what waits on the other side of the water. You fold your coat around your shoulders against the cool night and rest the paper on your knee. The pen feels heavy in your hand at first, but once it touches the page the words begin to flow like water finding its path after a long dry season. You write first to your mother. Your hand moves in the dim light of a single lantern that hangs from a nearby post, casting a soft circle that barely reaches the edges of the paper. You tell her that the boots have softened over the miles and that the rain in the distant hills taught you how to keep moving even when the ground pulls at your feet. You do not speak of the enormity that lies ahead. Instead, you describe the small things that have carried you this far, the man who shares his stories in the dark, the way the letters from home have felt like small lights in the long nights. Your words are simple and steady, the kind you hope will bring her comfort when she reads them at the kitchen table where the morning light once touched the envelope that changed everything. When you finish, you fold the paper carefully, the creases lining up neatly under your fingers, and slip it into the envelope with the same care you have used for every letter since the beginning. Beside you, the man who has walked with you since the long marches sits with his own paper. He is the same one who once shared his bread during the patient waiting and adjusted your pack in the endless rain. Tonight he writes in silence, his head bent low over the page. After a while he pauses and looks up, his eyes meeting yours in the soft glow. He does not ask what you have written. He simply offers a small nod, the kind that says he carries his own words across the same distance. You nod back, and in that quiet exchange something like a thread is drawn tighter between you. These small moments of shared stillness have become the everyday kindnesses that hold the night together when the weight of what is coming presses close. You think of the girl whose photograph rests in your pocket. You take it out for a moment and let the light touch her face, the same face that once waved from the edge of the fields as the train carried you away. In your mind you write to her without putting the words on paper, telling her that the journey has been long and that the rain and the hills have changed the shape of your steps but not the memory of her smile. The private fear rises gently then, not as a storm but as a slow tide that lifts questions about what the crossing will ask of you. Will the resolve you have found in the quiet conversations with the man beside you be enough when the water turns rough and the unknown opens before you? These thoughts do not demand answers. They simply sit beside you in the night air, companions you have learned to acknowledge without letting them fill every space. Around you other men move through their own quiet preparations. Someone checks the straps on his pack one last time, his hands moving with the same steady care he might use on a garden fence at home. Another sits with a small book open on his lap, though his eyes rest more on the page than on the words. The low murmur of voices drifts through the staging area like the sound of water over stones, stories shared in fragments about the towns left behind and the families waiting on the other side of the long silence. You listen without joining at first, letting the ordinary details settle into you like the rain once settled into the soil of the distant hills. Then the man beside you begins a slow story about the last meal he shared with his sister before he left, the way she passed the bread without speaking and how the light in their kitchen felt warmer than any fire. His voice is low and steady, and when he finishes you offer a small memory of your own about the way the creek near your home sounded after a long rain, the water moving over the stones as if nothing in the world had changed. These quiet conversations become the anchors that hold the night steady. They do not push away the private fears or the solemn weight of what lies ahead. They simply make room for them, turning the enormity into something that can be carried together rather than faced alone. You return to your letter and add a few more lines, telling your mother that the man who walks beside you has become like a brother through the shared silences and the small kindnesses that have marked every step since the first foreign soil. You write that you are well and that you think of home often, especially in these hours when the world seems to hold its breath. The words feel like a small offering you are sending across the miles, a way of keeping the kitchen table and the garden and the porch present even as the staging area fills with the low sounds of men preparing for the unknown. As the night deepens, the lantern light grows softer, and the air carries the faint scent of damp canvas and earth that has been walked over many times. You seal the envelope and place it with the others that will be collected before morning. The photograph goes back into your pocket where it rests against your heart, a small piece of home carried close as the resolve you have built through the rain and the waiting and the quiet talks with the man beside you. The private fears remain, but they feel lighter now, shared in the space between your words and his stories, held gently by the simple fact that neither of you faces the crossing alone. In these solemn letters and the private reckonings that fill the eve of the unknown, the hidden acts of quiet heroism live in the simple choice to keep writing, to keep sharing stories, to keep the thread of connection alive when everything else feels uncertain. If the story of these solemn letters and the quiet strength found in private reckonings on the eve of the unknown has moved something deep inside you, you might find comfort in the free ebook The Shadow War. 5 top-secret operations that shaped World War II, along with weekly deep dives into forgotten personal stories and hidden acts of quiet heroism that explore the inner lives of those who faced such moments. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The night continues its slow turning over the staging area. You lean back against the low wall of the tent and close your eyes for a moment, letting the steady presence of the man beside you anchor you in the present. The letters you have written rest safely with the others, ready to travel the long miles back to the homes that wait. In the soft darkness, the resolve you carry feels like a quiet light of its own, built not from grand gestures but from the small kindnesses and the shared silences that have marked every step since the envelope first rested on the kitchen table. The crossing still waits beyond the horizon, but for now the night holds you gently, and the words you have sent into the quiet space between what has been and what is still to come become the gentle bridges that keep the heart steady when the world feels on the edge of change. The landing craft rocks gently on the dark water, and in the cramped space the breathing of many men becomes the only steady rhythm against the restless waves that rise and fall without hurry. You sit with your back against the cold metal side, your knees drawn close and your pack resting between your boots. The sea moves beneath the boat in long, slow swells that lift everyone together and then set them down again, as if the water itself is breathing in time with the men inside. The air smells of salt and wet canvas and the faint trace of tobacco from somewhere in the shadows. Around you other soldiers sit in the same folded posture, their faces turned toward the low horizon or toward their own hands resting on their knees. No one speaks loudly. The only sounds are the creak of the boat and the soft splash of waves against the hull, and beneath it all the quiet, shared breathing that fills the space like a single heartbeat carried by many chests. You think of the letters folded in your pocket, the ones you wrote on the eve of this crossing. In them you told your mother about the way the man beside you has walked with you through rain and hills and long waits, and how his presence has become something steady when everything else shifts. You do not know if those words will ever reach the kitchen table where the morning light once touched the envelope. The thought sits gently in your chest, not as a sharp fear but as a quiet wondering that rises and settles with each roll of the boat. Beside you the same man leans his shoulder lightly against yours. He does not turn his head or speak, but the small contact is enough. It is the same quiet nearness he offered when the rain soaked through everything in the distant hills, the same steady presence that made the endless waiting feel less alone. In the rocking darkness, that nearness becomes a thread you can hold without looking. The private fears move through you like the waves move beneath the boat. They do not shout or demand attention. They simply rise when the craft dips low and then ease again when it lifts. You wonder what the shore will ask of you, whether the boots that have softened over so many miles will still find their footing when the ground turns rough and unfamiliar. These thoughts drift like mist across the water, touching you and then moving on. You reach into your coat and feel the photograph there, the one of the girl whose wave you still carry in your memory. The paper is warm from your body, and touching it brings a small steadiness, the way a letter from home once steadied you during the long marches. You do not take it out. You simply let your fingers rest against it for a moment before letting your hand fall back to your knee. Across the narrow space someone passes a cigarette down the line. When it reaches you, you take a slow draw and feel the warmth spread through your chest. You pass it to the man beside you without being asked. His fingers brush yours in the exchange, a small kindness that needs no words. He draws on the cigarette and hands it on, and the gesture moves through the boat like a quiet ripple. In these moments the wordless solidarity grows stronger. It lives in the way men adjust their packs so another can lean more comfortably, and the way a hand reaches out to steady someone when the boat rocks harder. These small acts of looking after one another have become the everyday heroism of the crossing, not loud or grand but steady as the breathing that fills the space. You think of the stories the man beside you has shared in other nights, the ones about his home and the way the light fell on his sister's face when she passed the bread. In this rocking boat those stories feel close, as if they are being carried with you across the water. You do not speak them aloud now. Instead you hold them in the quiet of your mind, letting them mix with your own memories of the kitchen table and the creek and the way the rain once sounded on the leaves in the distant hills. The private fears ease a little when you remember that the same man who shared those stories is sitting next to you, his shoulder a steady weight against yours. The boat continues its slow rise and fall, and the breathing around you remains the same low rhythm, a collective heartbeat that says you are not alone in this waiting darkness. The horizon ahead stays dark, a thin line where water meets sky. You watch it without straining, letting your eyes rest on the gentle movement of the waves. The man beside you shifts slightly and offers the cigarette again when it comes around. You take it and pass it on, the small circle of warmth moving through the boat like a thread being drawn tighter. In these shared gestures the courage you carry feels less like something you must find alone and more like something that grows between you and the others. It lives in the silence that needs no filling, in the way men sit close without crowding, in the quiet understanding that whatever waits on the shore will be met together. The letters in your pocket and the photograph against your heart become part of that same quiet strength, small anchors carried from home into this restless water. As the boat rocks on, the night begins to soften at the edges. The breathing around you stays steady, and the man beside you remains close. You close your eyes for a moment and let the motion of the sea and the presence of the others wash over you like a slow tide. The private fears are still there, but they no longer feel as heavy when shared in the cramped space. The small kindnesses and the wordless nearness have become the gentle light that pushes back against the darkness. You sit with the same steady presence the man beside you offers, and together you wait for whatever the dawn will bring across the restless waters. In the wordless solidarity that fills the landing craft before dawn, the quiet courage of simply staying close becomes the truest kind of strength when everything else feels uncertain. If the story of this shared presence and the gentle solidarity in the face of the unknown has touched something quiet inside you, you might find comfort in looking at some of the World War II memorabilia that still carries the feeling of those times, or perhaps in watching the movie Midway, which you can find on Prime. It offers a way to honor the quiet solidarity and personal courage that lived in such moments and to keep the memory of them close. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The boat continues its gentle rocking on the dark water. The breathing of the men around you remains the steady rhythm that holds the space together, and the man beside you stays close, his shoulder a quiet anchor in the moving darkness. In the hours before dawn, the small kindnesses and the shared silence become the gentle bridges that carry you forward, one slow swell at a time, toward whatever waits on the other side of the restless waves. The tangled hedgerows press close on every side, and in the narrow paths the world shrinks to the space between one careful step and the next, where the man beside you becomes the only steady thing in the green and shadowed quiet. You move through the close, winding ways with the others, your boots sinking into the soft earth that has been turned by many feet before yours. The hedgerows rise like living walls on either side, their branches weaving together overhead in a canopy that lets only thin fingers of light through. The air feels heavier here, carrying the scent of damp leaves and turned soil, and every sound seems to stay close, as if the paths themselves hold the echoes of footsteps and breath. You keep your eyes on the back of the man ahead, watching the way his shoulders shift with each slow placement of his feet, and you match your steps to his without needing to speak. The closeness of the green walls makes the world feel smaller, yet in that smallness the presence of the men around you grows larger, filling the space with a quiet nearness that needs no words. The man beside you is the same one who has walked with you through rain and hills and the long waiting. He moves with the same careful rhythm, his hands sometimes brushing the branches aside so they do not catch on your pack. When the path narrows and the mud pulls at your boots, he reaches back without looking and steadies you with a light touch on the arm. You do the same for him when his step falters on a hidden route, your hand finding his sleeve in the dim light. These small mercies happen without ceremony, the way water finds its way through the leaves. They become the everyday heroism of the narrow paths, ordinary gestures that keep each man moving when the green walls seem to close in. You think of the letters folded in your pocket, the ones that carry words from home and the ones you have written in reply. In the brief pauses when the squad rests against the side of the path, you sometimes touch the paper through the cloth of your coat, feeling the faint shape of the creases. The words from your mother about the kitchen table and the garden feel far away here, yet they remain a small light inside, a memory of open space and gentle light that pushes back against the closeness of the hedgerows. You do not take the letters out. You simply carry them as you carry the quiet presence of the man beside you, anchors that keep the heart steady when every step feels like a test of how far you can go. The private fears rise in the quiet stretches between one bend in the path and the next. They come as gentle questions about what might lie around the next turn, about whether the boots that have softened over so many miles will still find their way when the ground grows rougher. These thoughts do not shout. They drift like the thin light that filters through the leaves, touching you and then moving on. The man beside you must feel them too, for sometimes he begins a slow story in a voice low enough that only you can hear. He speaks of the town he left and the way the rain sounded on the roof of his childhood home. The story unfolds like the path itself, without hurry, filling the narrow space with ordinary things that still hold steady. You listen and offer a small memory of your own about the creek near your home and the way the water moved over the stones after a long rain. The words become another thread between you, another small kindness passed without needing to be named. When someone ahead slips on the slick ground and falls to one knee, hands reach out from several directions at once. You feel the man beside you move forward, and together you pull the fallen man to his feet, your hands finding his arms in the dim light. He nods his thanks, a small gesture that says more than words could, and the group continues without breaking stride. The act of lifting another becomes part of the rhythm of the paths, as natural as breathing in the close air. These quiet moments of reaching for one another forge the ties that make the narrow ways bearable. They reveal the everyday heroism in the most ordinary gestures, the simple choice to stay close and to steady the man who falters when the mud pulls too hard. The hedgerows continue to press in, their branches brushing against your shoulders and helmet as you move. The world outside the green walls feels very far away, yet inside the paths the small kindnesses accumulate like the soft earth beneath your boots. Someone shares a sip from a canteen when the thirst rises, passing it back without being asked. Another warns of a low branch with a quiet touch on the shoulder. You do the same, your hand finding the man beside you when the path dips suddenly. These gestures do not feel like courage in the way stories sometimes tell it. They feel like the simple, necessary ways people keep one another moving when the green walls seem to close tighter with every step. In the late light that filters through the leaves, you pause for a moment against the side of the path. The man beside you rests close, his breathing steady in the quiet. You think of the letters again and the way they have carried pieces of home across the miles. Here in the narrow paths, the home you carry is the presence of the men around you, the shared silences and the small mercies that have marked every turn. The private fears remain, but they walk with you now as companions rather than burdens, eased by the steady hands that reach out when the ground shifts. The hedgerows continue to wind, but the ties between you grow stronger with each careful step and each quiet act of pulling another to his feet. In the quiet acts of reaching out when the path grows rough and the mud pulls hard, the unfiltered human cost of moving through close spaces lives alongside the small everyday heroisms that keep each man steady. If these stories of narrow paths and the gentle ways men lifted one another have touched something deep inside you, you might find value in the digital collection of raw, uncensored images and videos available through Gumroad. They offer a deeper, more intimate look at the private moments of close-quarters struggle and the small acts of everyday heroism that shaped so many lives during those years. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The paths continue to wind through the green walls as you and the others move forward. Your boots leave fresh marks in the soft earth that will soon be softened by the next rain, yet the small threads of connection remain, tying each careful step to the ones before and the ones still to come. In the filtered light that falls between the leaves, the quiet resilience you carry feels like a gentle light of its own, built not from loud gestures but from the ordinary mercies and the steady presence of the man beside you who reaches back when the ground shifts beneath your feet. The narrow paths test every step, but they also reveal the simple strength that lives in staying close and sharing the canteen and pulling one another upright when the mud grows deep. The snow falls in thick, silent curtains over the frozen ground, and in the narrow foxhole the world shrinks to the space between your breath and the man beside you who shares the last thin blanket against the biting dark. You lie pressed close to the earthen wall, the cold seeping through every layer until it feels like another skin you cannot shed. The snow drifts down without sound, covering the edges of the hole and turning the world above into a soft white quiet that holds no answers. Your boots are packed with the same frozen earth that lines the walls, and your fingers move slowly inside your gloves as you try to keep the blood moving. Around you the night stretches long and still, broken only by the occasional low creak of branches under the weight of ice and the faint, steady breathing of the man whose shoulder rests against yours. This is the white silence of winter's fury, where the cold does not roar but settles in with patient persistence, testing every small reserve of warmth and will you have left. You think of the letters folded in your pocket, the ones that carry the scent of home even after weeks in the damp and now the freezing air. In the dim light that sometimes filters through the snow you have read them again, letting your mother's words about the kitchen table and the garden settle like small coals against the chill. You think of the girl whose photograph rests near your heart, her smile caught in a moment that now feels very far away. These thoughts rise gently in the long hours, not as sharp fears but as quiet companions that come and go with each slow breath. The private fear of the cold and the isolation sits beside you too, a gentle weight that asks how long the snow will keep falling and whether the warmth you carry inside will be enough. It does not demand answers. It simply waits with you in the narrow space, eased only by the presence of the man who shares the foxhole and the thin blanket that covers both your shoulders. He is the same one who has walked with you through the rain-soaked hills and the tangled paths, the one who once shared his paper for letters and half his bread during the long waiting. Tonight he shifts slightly and pulls the blanket higher over your arm without speaking, his movement careful so as not to disturb the small pocket of warmth you have created together. In return you pass him the last piece of the ration you have been saving, breaking it in half with fingers that move stiffly in the cold. He accepts it with a small nod, the kind that says more than words could in this white quiet. These small kindnesses have become the rhythm of the night, as steady as the snow that continues to fall. They turn the isolation into something shared, the terror of the freezing dark into a burden carried between two men who have learned that the simplest acts of looking after one another become the truest kind of strength. He begins a slow story in a voice low enough that only you can hear, his words drifting out like breath in the cold air. He speaks of the town he left and the way his father's hands looked when they worked the soil in the last autumn before everything changed. The story unfolds without hurry, filling the narrow foxhole with ordinary details that still hold steady even here, the smell of fresh bread from his mother's oven, the sound of rain on the roof of his childhood home. You listen and offer a small memory of your own about the creek near your house and the way the water moved over the stones after a long rain, the same rain that once soaked through everything in the distant hills. The words become another thread between you, another small mercy passed in the dark. When the story ends, he shifts again and tucks the blanket more securely around your shoulder, and in that simple adjustment the cold feels a little less sharp, the silence a little less empty. The night deepens and the snow keeps falling, turning the edges of the foxhole into soft white mounds that muffle every sound from the world beyond. You feel the private fears rise again when the wind picks up and sends a fresh drift of snow across your face. But they ease when the man beside you whispers a gentle joke about the way everyone's boots have begun to look the same after so many miles of mud and now ice. The small laugh that moves between you is quiet, almost lost in the falling snow, yet it carries a warmth that spreads through your chest like the last sip of hot coffee from a canteen shared earlier in the day. These whispered jokes and shared stories become the gentle lights that push back against the white fury outside. They do not make the cold disappear. They simply make it bearable, turning the long hours into something you endure together rather than something each man faces alone. You think again of the letters and the way they have carried pieces of home across the miles, from the kitchen table where the morning light once touched the envelope to this frozen hole in the ground. In the quiet you imagine writing one more, telling your mother that even in the coldest hours the man beside you has become like a brother through the simple acts of sharing a blanket and passing a ration and offering a story when the silence grows too heavy. You do not have paper or pen here, but the words form in your mind and settle like the snow itself, gentle and persistent. The private fears that sometimes rise in these white nights find less room to grow when there is always the steady presence of another who carries the same cold and the same quiet resolve to keep going. The everyday heroism of this place lives in these small exchanges, and the way two men huddle close and turn the freezing dark into a space where warmth can still be found and shared. As the hours pass, the snow softens its fall for a little while, and the foxhole grows quieter still. You close your eyes and let the breathing of the man beside you anchor you in the present. The blanket covers both of you now, a thin layer of shared warmth against the biting air. In the gathering stillness, the simple miracle of this closeness becomes the truest kind of endurance, the kind that asks nothing more than that you stay near and keep the small kindnesses alive when everything else feels lost to the white silence. In the simple miracle of a shared blanket and a whispered joke that still brings a small laugh in the coldest hours, the quiet endurance of men who refuse to face the freezing dark alone becomes the deepest kind of strength. If these stories of shared warmth and the gentle ways men carried one another through the long white nights have touched something quiet inside you, A small tip as low as $1 through Ko-Fi would help keep this deeply researched work of preserving such human moments alive for others who find comfort in them. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The snow continues its patient fall over the frozen ground as you and the man beside you remain close in the narrow foxhole. The blanket stays tucked around your shoulders, and the small warmth it holds becomes the steady thing that carries you through the long night. In the white silence, the private fears walk with you still, but they no longer walk alone. They are eased by the whispered stories, the shared rations, and the simple presence of another who understands the weight of the cold without needing to name it. The letters in your pocket and the memories of home rest gently inside you, anchors that keep the heart from freezing even when the world outside turns to ice and silence. You breathe in the cold air and let it out slowly, matching the rhythm of the man beside you, and together you wait for whatever the dawn will bring when the snow finally softens its hold on the hills. The road stretches ahead through towns that once held ordinary lives, and with each step you carry both the weight of what has been broken and the quiet hope that the long march might one day lead home. You walk with the others along the pitted road, your boots finding the same careful rhythm that has carried you through rain and hills and the narrow paths of trial. The air here smells of smoke and damp earth and the faint trace of things left behind, and the buildings on either side stand with windows like empty eyes that have seen too much. You keep your gaze on the ground ahead, on the way the dust rises softly with each footfall, because looking too long at the broken walls and scattered belongings makes the heart feel heavier than the pack on your back. The man beside you walks in step, the same one who shared his blanket in the white silence of winter and his stories in the foxhole. He says little, but when the path narrows around a fallen beam he reaches out without looking and steadies you with a light touch on the arm. You do the same for him when his boot catches on a loose stone, and in these small gestures the long march feels less like a solitary journey and more like something carried together. The towns you pass through have been emptied of their familiar rhythms. Doors hang open on hinges that no longer hold, and the gardens that once grew vegetables and flowers now lie trampled and quiet. You see an old woman sitting on the steps of what remains of her home, her hands folded in her lap as if she is waiting for something that may never return. Without thinking, you slow your step and reach into your pack for the last piece of the bread you have been saving. You hold it out to her as you pass, and she takes it with both hands, her eyes meeting yours for a moment that needs no words. In that exchange something small and important passes between you, a quiet mercy that does not erase the sorrow of the broken walls but softens it, like a gentle hand placed on a tired shoulder. The man beside you watches and then does the same with a small tin of rations he has been carrying, offering it to a child who stands nearby with wide, uncertain eyes. The boy accepts it and gives a small nod before turning back toward the woman, and in these ordinary acts of sharing what little you have, the long march gains a different kind of weight, one made lighter by the simple choice to leave kindness in places where so much has been taken away. You think of the letters folded in your pocket, the ones that have traveled with you from the kitchen table where the morning light once touched the envelope. In the quiet moments when the column pauses, you sometimes take one out and read a few lines, letting your mother's words about the garden and the way the light falls across the floor settle into you like small anchors. You imagine writing back about these shattered lands, about the way the sorrow for what has been lost sits beside the relief that the road is still moving forward. You do not put those words on paper yet. Instead, you carry them in your thoughts, alongside the memory of the girl whose photograph rests near your heart, in the hope that one day the roads you walk will lead back to open fields and familiar porches rather than broken towns. These reflections do not demand answers. They simply walk with you, eased by the presence of the man beside you who sometimes begins a slow story about the home he left, his voice low so that only you can hear as the column continues its steady pace. The private fears rise in the long stretches between one ruined village and the next. They come as gentle questions about what these shattered places mean for the future, about whether the kindness you offer now can ever balance the weight of all that has been lost. These thoughts drift like the dust that rises from the road, touching you and then moving on. You feel them most when you pass a group of civilians gathered around a small fire, their faces etched with the same quiet endurance you have seen in the eyes of the men around you. One of them, an older man with hands that once worked the soil, offers a cup of water as you pass. You accept it with the same nod of thanks you have given and received so many times, and in that simple exchange the sorrow in your chest finds a little more room to breathe. The man beside you does the same, sharing a word or two in the language of gestures that needs no translation, and together you leave the small fire feeling that even in these broken lands the thread of human connection has not been entirely severed. As the march continues, the road begins to climb again, winding through hills that still carry the scars of what has passed. You see a wounded soldier from another unit resting against a low wall, his leg wrapped in a makeshift bandage. Without being asked, the man beside you stops and helps adjust the wrapping, his hands moving with the same steady care he once used to share a blanket in the freezing dark. You stand watch for a moment, offering a sip from your canteen, and the wounded man's eyes hold a quiet gratitude that says more than any words could. These small mercies offered to strangers become the everyday heroism of the long march, the simple choice to pause and help when the road could so easily carry you past without stopping. They do not change the shattered lands around you, but they change the way the heart carries the sorrow, turning it into something shared rather than something borne alone. The column moves on, and you fall back into step with the man beside you. He begins another slow story, this one about the way his sister used to leave a light in the window when he was late coming home from the fields. You listen as the road stretches ahead, letting the ordinary details of his memory mix with your own thoughts of the kitchen table and the garden and the way the light once fell across the envelope that started this long journey. The private fears that sometimes rise in these shattered places feel lighter when carried in the space between your steps and his stories. The small mercies you have offered and received become the quiet anchors that keep the heart from growing too heavy, the gentle lights that push back against the sorrow of all that has been broken. And the small mercies offered to civilians along the way and the quiet sorrow that walks beside every step through these shattered lands, the grace that still lives in ordinary hands and ordinary hearts becomes the truest kind of strength. If these stories of grace amid ruin and the gentle ways men offered kindness even when the world around them lay broken have stayed with you, you might enjoy joining the Patreon community where free podcasts and raw unblurred video sections explore these intimate personal moments in greater depth, alongside a supportive group of fellow history lovers who cherish the quiet resilience found in such everyday acts of connection. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The road continues to wind through the hills and the broken towns as you and the others keep moving forward. Your boots leave fresh marks in the dust that will soon be softened by the next rain or the next set of feet, yet the small threads of connection remain, tying each careful step to the ones before and the ones still to come. In the quiet light that falls across the shattered lands, the sorrow you carry feels less sharp when shared with the man beside you and with the strangers who have offered water or a nod of thanks along the way. The letters in your pocket and the memories of home rest gently inside you, and the long march, though heavy with all that has been lost, becomes something you endure together, one small mercy at a time, toward whatever lies beyond the next bend in the road. The guns fall silent across the fields, and in the sudden quiet the world seems to hold its breath, leaving only the sound of your own breathing and the quiet presence of the men around you who have walked every step of the long road with you. You stand with your boots planted in the soft earth, the weight of your pack still pressing against your shoulders even though there is no longer any need to move forward. The air feels different now, lighter in a way that makes the silence feel almost heavy, as if the sky itself is settling after a long storm. Around you the other men do the same, some lowering their weapons with slow, careful movements, others simply standing with their hands at their sides as if they are waiting for something that will not come. The man beside you, the same one who shared his blanket in the white silence of winter and his stories in the foxhole, turns his head slightly and meets your eyes. He does not speak. He only offers a small nod, the kind that says the chapter has ended but the weight of it remains with all of you. The relief comes first, a gentle wave that moves through your chest and loosens something that has been tight for so long you had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. The long march through rain and hills and shattered lands is over. The narrow paths of trial and the restless waters before dawn are behind you. Yet as the quiet settles deeper, another feeling rises alongside the relief, a quiet sorrow that does not shout but simply sits in the space where the noise used to live. You think of the men who are not standing here, the ones whose laughter once filled the barracks and whose hands once reached out to steady you when the mud pulled too hard. Their faces come to you in the stillness, not as sharp memories but as soft impressions, like the way the light once fell across the kitchen table where you once sat with an envelope in your hands. You reach into your coat and touch the letters folded there, the ones that have traveled with you across the miles. In the sudden quiet you think of writing one more, though there is no paper or pen in this moment. You imagine telling your mother that the waiting and the walking and the small kindnesses have brought you to this place where the guns no longer speak, and that even in the grief for those who did not make it, there is a thread of gratitude for the ones who did. The man beside you shifts his weight and rests his hand lightly on your shoulder for a moment, a small gesture that needs no words. It is the same steady presence he has offered through every rain-soaked hill and every frozen night, and in this new silence it becomes something even more important. It is the quiet reminder that you are not carrying the end of this chapter alone. Around you other men begin to move, some sitting down on the ground as if their legs have only now remembered how tired they are, others gathering in small groups where low voices rise and fall like the gentle lapping of water after a storm. Someone passes a canteen down the line, and when it reaches you the water tastes clean and cool, a small mercy that settles in your chest like the first sip of something warm on a cold morning. You drink and pass it on, watching as the man beside you does the same. These ordinary gestures feel different now, as if they are marking the beginning of something rather than the endurance of something. The private fears that once rose in the dark foxholes and the narrow paths have quieted, yet in their place is a different kind of wondering, a gentle ache for the friends whose names will never be called again when the roll is taken. You think of the girl whose photograph rests near your heart, the one whose wave you still carry in your memory from the day the train carried you away. In the stillness you wonder what you will see in your eyes when you finally stand before her again, whether the quiet sorrow you carry now will be visible or whether it will settle into something softer over time. The man beside you begins a slow story, his voice low and steady in the new quiet. He speaks of the home he left and the way his sister used to leave a light in the window, and as he talks, you feel the tangled emotions in your chest begin to loosen just a little. The relief and the grief sit side by side, not fighting for space but simply sharing it, the way two men might share a blanket in the coldest hours. You listen and offer a small memory of your own about the creek near your home and the way the water always sounded the same no matter how far the road had taken you. The words become another thread between you, another small kindness passed in the sudden stillness. As the hours pass, the quiet deepens into something almost sacred. Men move through the fields gathering what little remains, sharing what they have with those who have less. You see one soldier help another adjust a bandage on his arm, his hands moving with the same careful attention he once used to share a cigarette in the rocking boat before dawn. These small acts of looking after one another have not changed with the silence. They have simply become the way you all mark the end of the long chapter, the everyday heroism that has carried you from the first envelope to this moment where the guns no longer speak. The sorrow for the fallen brothers sits in your chest like a stone that has been carried for a long time, but it is no longer a burden you must bear alone. It is shared in the quiet looks and the low voices and the way the man beside you stays close without needing to fill the space with words. In the tangled joy and private grief that rise together in the sudden stillness, the hidden acts of quiet heroism live in the simple choice to stand together and to carry the memories of those who are no longer here. If the story of these tangled emotions and the gentle ways men held space for both relief and sorrow has moved something quiet inside you, you might find comfort in the free ebook The Shadow War. 5 top-secret operations that shaped World War II, along with weekly deep dives into forgotten personal stories and hidden acts of quiet heroism that explore the inner lives of those who reached such moments. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The fields remain quiet as the light begins to change, and you stand with the others in the space that was once filled with noise and is now filled only with the soft sounds of breathing and the occasional low word. The man beside you remains close, his presence a steady anchor in the new stillness. You think of the letters you will write when paper and pen are found again, the ones that will carry the story of this moment back to the kitchen table where it all began. The private fears have quieted, the long road has ended, and in the sudden stillness the heart learns to hold both the joy of survival and the sorrow for those who did not make it to this quiet place. The chapter has closed, but the men who walked it together remain, and in their shared silence the next chapter begins with the same quiet strength that has carried you from the first step to this one. The wide deck of the ship rocks gently under your feet, and the same ocean that once carried you away now sways you toward home with a slow, steady rhythm that feels almost like a lullaby after all the noise. You stand at the rail with your hands resting on the cool metal, watching the water rise and fall in long, patient swells that lift the ship and set it down again as if it too is breathing after a long effort. The air smells of salt and damp wood and the faint trace of fuel that clings to everything, yet beneath it there is something softer, something that hints at land still far away but growing closer with every turn of the engines. Around you other men lean against the rail or sit on crates with their packs at their feet, their faces turned toward the horizon or toward their own hands folded in their laps. The man who has walked beside you through every rain-soaked hill and every frozen night stands close, his shoulder brushing yours now and then as the ship moves. He does not speak at first. He simply stands with you in the quiet, and in that shared stillness the long journey begins to settle into something you can carry without it pressing so hard against your ribs. You think of the letters folded in your pocket, the ones you wrote in the sudden stillness after the guns fell silent and the ones you received in the long months before. In your mind you compose another, telling your mother that the road has turned at last and that the ship now rocks you toward the kitchen table where the morning light once touched the envelope that changed everything. You imagine her reading it in the same chair where she sat when the news first came, her hands moving slowly over the paper as if she can feel the miles and the months in the creases. The thought brings a quiet warmth, yet it also stirs a small private fear that rises like a gentle wave and then settles again. You wonder what she will see in your eyes when you finally stand before her, whether the man who returns will still fit the shape of the son she remembers or whether the quiet sorrow and the small mercies you have carried will have changed the way you stand in the light of that familiar room. The man beside you shifts his weight and begins a slow story in the low voice he uses when the night is long or the silence feels too heavy. He speaks of the home he left and the way his sister used to leave a light in the window when he was late coming home from the fields. His words unfold without hurry, filling the space between you with ordinary details that still hold steady even after everything that has passed. You listen and offer a small memory of your own about the creek near your house and the way the water always sounded the same no matter how far the road had taken you. The conversation becomes another thread between you, another small kindness passed in the rocking quiet of the deck. These talks have become the rhythm of the journey home, the way you both weave hope from everything endured, turning the grief for those who did not make it and the relief of the sudden stillness into something that can be carried forward rather than left behind. As the ship moves through the long swells, the days blend into one another with the same gentle repetition as the waves. You sit on the deck with your back against a crate and watch the horizon change from gray to soft blue and back again, the light falling differently on the water each time the sun moves. The man beside you sometimes shares a cigarette or a sip from a canteen, small gestures that need no words but still carry the same steady presence he offered in the foxhole and on the narrow paths. When the wind picks up and sends a spray of salt water across the rail, he pulls his coat higher around his shoulders and offers you the edge of it without being asked, the way he once shared the last thin blanket in the white silence of winter. These ordinary mercies become the anchors that keep the heart steady when the private fears rise again. The gentle wondering about how the life you left will receive the man you have become after so many miles and so many quiet nights of carrying more than just your pack. You think often of the girl whose photograph rests near your heart, the one whose wave you still see in your mind from the day the train carried you away. In the quiet hours on the deck you imagine what it will be like to stand before her again, to tell her about the rain and the distant hills and the way the man beside you became like a brother through shared stories and small kindnesses. The anticipation grows with each passing swell, yet it carries a thread of anxiety that the quiet sorrow you have learned to hold might make the reunion feel different than the one you once imagined. These feelings do not fight for space. They simply walk together in your chest, eased by the conversations that continue to weave hope from everything that has been lost and everything that has been found along the way. The ship rocks on through the long days and longer nights, and the men around you begin to speak more openly of what waits on the other side. Some talk of the jobs they will look for and the families they will hold again, while others sit in quieter groups and simply watch the water as if they are still learning how to let the silence settle without the weight of what came before. You and the man beside you often stand at the rail together in the late light, your words flowing as slowly as the waves beneath the ship. He tells you about the garden his father used to tend and how he plans to help with the planting when he returns, and you speak of the porch swing and the way the wind moves through the tall grass near the creek. These conversations become the gentle bridges that carry you forward, turning the long journey home into something that feels less like an ending and more like a beginning you are still learning how to name. In the conversations that we've hoped from everything endured on the long journey home, the quiet reflections and the steady presence of those who shared every step become the truest kind of strength. If the story of these quiet reflections and the gentle ways men wove hope from all that had been lost and found has touched something deep inside you, you might find comfort in looking at some of the World War II memorabilia that still carries the feeling of those times, or perhaps in watching the movie Midway, which you can find on Prime. It offers a way to honor the quiet hope and personal reflections of the long journey home and to keep the memory of such moments close. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The ship continues its steady rocking across the wide ocean as you and the man beside you stand together at the rail. The horizon grows softer with each passing day, and the conversations that fill the quiet hours become the gentle threads that tie the past to whatever waits ahead. You carry the letters in your pocket and the photograph near your heart, and in the slow rhythm of the waves the private fears and the quiet hope walk together, eased by the simple presence of those who have endured the same long road. The homeward tide rocks you forward one gentle swell at a time, and the man who has become like a brother through shared stories and small kindnesses remains close, his shoulder a steady anchor in the moving quiet of the journey that still carries you toward the life you left and the life you are still learning how to return to. The train slows as it pulls into the station of your old town, and though the platform looks exactly as you remembered, the man stepping off it feels like a visitor in his own life. You stand for a moment on the worn wooden boards, your bag resting at your feet, while the familiar shapes of the station roof and the distant line of trees settle into your eyes like something half-remembered from a dream. The air carries the same scent of coal smoke and cut grass that it always did on summer afternoons, yet it feels different against your skin, as if the months and miles have changed the way you receive even the smallest details. Your mother stands a few steps away, her hands clasped in front of her apron the way she used to hold them when she waited for you to come in from the fields. Her eyes fill when she sees you, and before you can set your bag down she steps forward and pulls you into an embrace that is both achingly familiar and strangely distant. Her arms are the same arms that once rested on your shoulder in the kitchen the morning the envelope arrived, yet they now feel smaller against the changes that have settled into your own frame. You breathe in the scent of her hair and the faint trace of the bread she must have baked that morning, and for a long moment the words you have carried across the ocean and the long road simply stay folded inside your chest. When she finally steps back, her hands linger on your arms, her eyes searching your face in the quiet way that says she sees the man who left and the one who has returned in the same glance. Your father stands a little behind her, his hands in his pockets, the newspaper folded under one arm as if he has only now remembered to set it down. He does not speak at first. He simply reaches out and rests his palm on your shoulder with the same steady weight he once used to steady a fence post or a young boy learning to swing a hammer. In that touch there is everything he cannot shape into words, the pride, the relief, and the quiet understanding that the son who stands before him has walked through places that cannot be fully spoken of at the kitchen table. The girl who once lived 2 houses down stands a little farther back, her hands folded in front of her dress the way she used to hold them when she waited by the fence. Her smile is the same smile that once caught the light when she tucked a flower into your pocket, yet her eyes hold a new gentleness, as if she too has learned to carry things that do not need to be named aloud. When she steps forward and takes your hand, the gesture is small and natural, yet it carries the weight of all the letters you wrote and all the nights you imagined this moment. You do not pull away. You simply let her fingers rest against yours and feel the quiet thread of connection that has survived the distance. You think of the letters folded in your bag, the ones you wrote on the ship and in the sudden stillness after the guns fell silent. In them you tried to describe the rain and the distant hills and the way the man who became like a brother shared his stories and his blanket when the cold grew too deep. You did not write of the private fears that rose in the narrow paths or the quiet sorrow that settled after the long march through shattered lands. Those words stayed inside, carried alongside the photograph that still rests near your heart. Now, standing on the platform where everything looks the same and nothing feels quite the same, you feel those unspoken changes moving through you like the slow rocking of the ship that brought you home. The relief of the sudden stillness and the grief for those who did not make it sit together in your chest, eased only by the presence of the people who have waited without needing every detail explained. Your mother takes your bag without asking and begins to walk toward the car, her steps steady and familiar on the path that leads away from the station. You fall into step beside her, the man who once walked the narrow paths with you now walking only in memory, yet the quiet resilience he helped you carry remains. Your father opens the car door and sets your bag in the back seat with the same careful attention he once gave to mending a broken hinge. The girl walks on your other side, her shoulder brushing yours now and then in the easy way of someone who has known you since before the envelope arrived. These small kindnesses, the way your mother carries the bag, the way your father opens the door, the way the girl stays close without pressing for words, become the gentle anchors that help you step across the threshold of the familiar yet altered world. Inside the car the silence is comfortable rather than heavy. Your mother speaks first, her voice soft as she tells you about the garden and the way the light still falls across the kitchen table in the late afternoon. She does not ask about the places you have been or the things you have seen. She simply offers the ordinary details of home as if she knows they are the ones that will settle the changes inside you more gently than any questions could. Your father drives with both hands on the wheel, his eyes on the road, yet every so often he glances in the rearview mirror and meets your gaze with a small nod that says he understands the quiet that has come home with you. The girl sits beside you in the back seat, her hands resting in her lap, and when she speaks it is about the porch swing and the way the wind still moves through the tall grass near the creek. Her words are simple and steady, the kind that do not demand answers but simply remind you that some things have remained steady while you were away. As the car turns onto the familiar road that leads to the house, you feel the private fears that have traveled with you since the first foreign soil begin to ease. They do not disappear. They simply find a different place to rest when surrounded by the small kindnesses of the people who have waited without needing to understand every shadow that has settled behind your eyes. The house appears at the end of the lane, its roof and windows exactly as you remembered, yet when you step through the door the rooms feel both achingly familiar and strangely distant, as if the walls themselves have learned to hold the quiet changes that war leaves in a man. Your mother sets your bag by the stairs and turns to you with the same gentle smile she wore the morning you left. She does not ask if you are hungry or tired. She simply rests her hand on your arm and says, in the soft voice that has carried you through every letter, that she is glad you are home. In the overwhelming yet natural embrace and the unspoken changes that settle in the quiet spaces between old walls and familiar faces, the unfiltered emotions of coming home live in the small gestures and the steady presence of those who waited. If the story of this tender return and the quiet inner shifts that accompany it has touched something deep inside you, you might find value in the digital collection of raw, uncensored images and videos available through Gumroad. They offer a deeper, more intimate look at the private emotions of homecoming and the subtle transformations that words alone cannot fully capture. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The house settles around you with the same slow rhythm it always had, the floorboards creaking under familiar feet and the light falling across the kitchen table in the late afternoon just as your mother described. You sit in the chair where you once opened the envelope, your hands resting on the wood that still holds the memory of that morning. The girl sits across from you, her smile soft and steady, while your mother moves quietly at the stove and your father unfolds the newspaper with the same careful creases he has always made. The private fears that once rose in the dark and the quiet sorrow that walked with you through shattered lands find less room to grow in this space where small kindnesses and unspoken understanding fill the air like the scent of bread baking. The man you have become sits at the table with the people who have waited, and in the gentle light of the familiar yet altered world the long journey finds its first quiet rest. The dinner table is set with the same plates and the same careful folds in the napkins, yet when you sit down the space between the familiar faces feels wider than the miles you have traveled. You pull out the chair that has always been yours and lower yourself into it with the same slow care you once used to settle into a foxhole after a long day of walking. The wood feels the same beneath your hands, the grain worn smooth by years of elbows and plates and the quiet conversations that once filled this room. Your mother moves around the table with the same gentle rhythm she has always had, setting down the bowl of potatoes and the plate of bread she baked that morning. She does not ask what you would like. She simply places everything in front of you as if she knows that the ordinary acts of feeding you will say more than any question could. Your father sits at the head of the table, his hands resting on either side of his plate, the newspaper folded and set aside for later. He looks at you with the same steady eyes that once watched you walk away down the road, yet now there is a softness in them that was not there before, a quiet understanding that the son who has returned carries things that cannot be seen on the surface. The girl who once lived 2 houses down sits across from you, her hands folded in her lap the way they were on the platform the day you arrived. She smiles when your eyes meet, a small, steady smile that does not ask for stories but simply says she is glad you are here. The room smells of the same bread and the same roasted vegetables that have always marked these family meals, yet the air between you all feels different, as if the months and the miles have created a gentle distance that no amount of familiar food can quite close. You reach for the bread and pass it to your father without being asked, the same small gesture you once made when the man beside you in the narrow paths needed a steady hand. He takes it with a nod and passes it on to your mother, and in that simple chain of hands the gap between those who waited and the one who returned feels a little smaller for a moment. You think of the letters you wrote from the ship and from the sudden stillness after the guns fell silent. In them you tried to describe the rain and the distant hills and the way the man who became like a brother shared his stories when the cold grew too deep. You did not write of the private fears that rose in the foxholes or the quiet sorrow that walked with you through the shattered lands. Those words stayed folded inside, carried alongside the photograph that still rests near your heart. Now, sitting at this table where the light falls across the plates in the same way it always has, you feel those unspoken things moving through you like a slow current. The relief of coming home and the grief for those who did not make it sit side by side in your chest, eased only by the presence of the people who have waited without needing every shadow explained. Your mother begins to speak in her soft voice, telling you about the garden and the way the tomatoes have grown taller this year than they ever have before. She does not ask about the places you have seen or the things you have carried. She simply offers the ordinary details of home as if she knows they are the ones that will help the distance between you settle into something gentler. Your father listens and adds a small comment about the fence he mended last week, his words steady and familiar. The girl across from you smiles again and passes you the bowl of vegetables without speaking, her gesture quiet and natural, the way she once tucked a flower into your pocket before you left. These small kindnesses, the way your mother fills your plate, the way your father shares a piece of the day, the way the girl stays close without pressing for words, become the gentle anchors that help you sit at the table where stories often pause. When the meal is nearly finished and the plates are mostly empty, a quiet falls over the room. Your mother looks at you with eyes that hold both the love she has always carried and the gentle uncertainty of someone who does not know how to ask what cannot be easily told. You feel the private fear rise then, the one that has traveled with you since the first foreign soil, the fear that the gap between those who waited and the one who returned might never fully close. It does not shout or demand attention. It simply sits in the space between the bread plate and the salt shaker, eased by the warmth of the meal and the love that remains even when the stories pause. You reach across the table and rest your hand lightly on your mother's for a moment, the same way the man beside you once rested his hand on your shoulder in the white silence of winter. The touch says what words cannot, that you are here, that you are changed, and that the love at this table is steady enough to hold both. Your father clears his throat softly and begins to speak of the porch swing and how he fixed the chain last month. The girl adds a quiet memory about the way the wind still moves through the tall grass near the creek. These ordinary stories fill the space without demanding that you fill it with your own. They become the gentle bridge across the gap, the small kindnesses that say you do not have to explain everything for the love to remain. You listen and let the words settle into you like the rain once settled into the soil of the distant hills. The private fears that sometimes rise in these quiet moments find less room to grow when surrounded by the warmth of the meal and the steady presence of those who waited. In the warmth of the meal and the love that remains even when the stories pause, the quiet readjustment between those who waited and the one who returned becomes the truest kind of everyday heroism. If these stories of tender homecomings and the gentle ways families held space for both what was spoken and what remained unsaid have touched something quiet inside you, a small tip as low as $1 through Ko-Fi would help keep this deeply researched work of preserving such human moments alive for others who find comfort in them. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The table remains set with the same plates and the same careful folds in the napkins as the evening light begins to fade. Your mother clears the dishes with the same gentle rhythm she has always had, and your father unfolds the newspaper with the same careful creases. The girl helps carry the plates to the sink, her shoulder brushing yours in the easy way of someone who has known you since before the envelope arrived. You sit for a moment longer in the chair that has always been yours, letting the warmth of the meal and the love that remains settle into the spaces where the private fears once rose more sharply. The gap between those who waited and the one who returned does not disappear in a single evening. It simply becomes something you all carry together, eased by the small kindnesses and the steady presence of family who do not need every story told to know that you are home. The letters in your bag and the memories of the long road rest gently inside you, and in the quiet of the kitchen the readjustment begins its slow, patient work, one ordinary meal and one unspoken understanding at a time. In the years that follow, the garden you tend becomes a quiet place where memories grow alongside the flowers, and the wind through the leaves carries the names of those who walked beside you. You kneel in the soft earth with your hands moving slowly among the plants, the same hands that once held a rifle and later folded letters from home. The soil feels familiar beneath your fingers, richer now than the mud of distant hills or the frozen ground of winter foxholes, yet it still holds the quiet weight of everything you have carried. You plant the seeds with care, pressing them gently into the earth the way you once steadied a comrade when the path grew narrow. A small breeze moves through the leaves above, and for a moment you pause, letting the sound settle around you like the breathing of the man who once shared your silence in the white stillness of winter. In that pause lives the first of the quiet rituals that keep the bonds alive, the ones no one else sees, but that turn each ordinary afternoon into a living tribute to those who did not return. You rise and walk the rows you have tended for years now, your boots leaving soft marks in the soil that will soon be smoothed by the next rain. The photograph rests in your pocket as it has for so long, its edges worn smooth from being held and folded and carried across oceans and through shattered lands. You take it out sometimes in the late light and let the sun touch the faces captured there, the ones who once passed a canteen or shared a story when the darkness grew too heavy. The names are not spoken aloud here in the garden, but they move through you with each careful step between the plants. This is the second ritual, the private remembering that needs no audience, the gentle act of keeping their presence alive in the same hands that once reached out to pull them to their feet when the mud pulled too hard. The girl who once lived 2 houses down now walks these rows with you on some evenings, her steps quiet beside yours as the light fades. She does not ask about the pauses or the way your eyes sometimes rest on a particular patch of earth where nothing grows but memory. She simply stays close, her hand brushing yours now and then in the easy way of someone who has learned to hold the spaces that words cannot fill. When the breeze moves again, she waits with you, her presence a small kindness that echoes the steady companionship you once found in the man who became like a brother through shared bread and shared stories. These walks at dusk become another ritual, the turning of ordinary evenings into something sacred, where the past and the present walk together without demanding explanation. You think of the letters still kept in a wooden box inside the house, the ones written on the ship and in the sudden stillness after the guns fell silent. In the garden you sometimes carry one with you, its paper softened by years of being read and folded again. The words from your mother about the kitchen table and the light that once fell across the envelope now sit beside newer memories, the ones of rain in the distant hills and the way the man beside you once adjusted your pack without being asked. These letters have become part of the rituals too, read in the quiet hours when the work of the day is done and the remembering rises like the evening mist. They do not bring sharp pain anymore. They bring instead a gentle thread that ties the life you live now to the one you once thought you might never return to. The private fears that once rose in the dark and the quiet sorrow that walked with you through the long march have softened over the years, eased by these small acts of remembrance that need no one else to witness them. When the wind moves through the leaves in a certain way, you stand still for a moment longer than necessary, letting the sound carry the names and the faces and the small mercies that once kept you moving forward. This is the everyday heroism of the later years. The quiet choice to keep the bonds alive not through grand gestures but through the patient tending of soil and memory, the careful preservation of a faded photograph, the shared silence with someone who understands without needing every story told. Your mother, when she was still here, would sometimes sit on the porch and watch you work in the garden. She never asked what the pauses meant or why certain patches of earth seemed to hold more of your attention. She simply brought you a glass of water or a piece of the bread she had baked that morning, her hands moving with the same gentle rhythm that once set plates on the table where stories often paused. Those small kindnesses from her became part of the rituals too, the way love continues even after the ones who gave it have gone. You carry her presence in the same quiet way you carry the others, turning the ordinary work of tending the garden into a living bridge between all the chapters of the long journey. In the years that have passed since the ship rocked you home and the train brought you to the familiar yet altered platform, these private rituals have become the steady anchors that keep the heart from forgetting. They do not erase the weight of what was lost. They simply give it a place to rest, like seeds planted in soil that has learned to hold both growth and memory at the same time. The man who once shared your blanket and your stories lives on in the way you pause when the wind moves, in the way you tend the earth with hands that once reached out in the narrow paths, in the way you let the photograph rest against your heart during the quiet walks at dusk. These are the small, unseen acts that turn the ordinary days into something more than ordinary, the everyday heroism of remembering without needing the world to watch. In the small private rituals that keep memory alive, the pausing when the wind moves a certain way, the careful tending of soil and photograph, the shared silence with those who understand, the quiet legacy of those who walk beside you becomes a gentle light that still guides the ordinary days. If these stories of quiet remembrance and the gentle ways of life can become a living tribute to those who carried us through have stayed with you, you might enjoy joining the Patreon community where free podcasts and raw unblurred video sections explore these intimate personal moments in greater depth, alongside a supportive group of fellow history lovers who cherish the quiet resilience found in such everyday acts of legacy. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The garden continues to grow under your hands as the seasons turn, the flowers and vegetables rising and falling with the same patient rhythm as the wind through the leaves. You walk the rows at dusk when the light softens, sometimes alone and sometimes with the girl who has stayed beside you through all the chapters since the first envelope arrived. The photograph rests in your pocket, its presence as steady as the soil beneath your boots. In these quiet rituals, the bonds that once held you through rain and hills and frozen nights remain alive, not as sharp memories but as gentle threads woven into the fabric of ordinary days. The long journey that began with a single letter has become a life shaped by the small, unseen acts of remembering, and in the peaceful tending of the garden the heart finds its quiet rest, carrying forward the light of those who once walked beside you into every new season that arrives. The years settle softly around you like the last light of evening, and the long chapter that began with a single envelope now rests in the quiet of memory, its weight carried not as a burden but as a gentle thread woven into the fabric of ordinary days. You sit in the same chair where you once opened that envelope, the morning light falling across the table in the same way it did then, though the hands that rest on the wood are older now and carry the quiet knowledge of everything that followed. The garden outside the window has grown tall with the seasons you have tended it, each row a living reminder of the small rituals that have kept the bonds alive. The photograph rests nearby, its edges softened by years of being held, and beside it lie the letters that once crossed oceans and now rest in a wooden box that opens only when the remembering rises like evening mist. In this gentle light, the story of the long journey feels less like something that happened to you and more like something that shaped the way you now move through the world, each step carrying the echo of the man who once walked beside you through rain and hills and frozen nights. You think of the first morning when the paper in your hands changed the shape of everything familiar, the way your mother's hand rested on your shoulder and your father's nod carried the weight of words he could not speak. That single moment opened a road that led through the slow wheels of farewell and the patient wait under foreign skies, through the narrow paths of trial where small mercies became the everyday heroism that kept you moving. The man who shared his paper and his bread, who adjusted your pack and told stories in the dark, became the steady presence that turned private fears into something carried together rather than faced alone. His quiet strength lives on in the way you now pause when the wind moves through the leaves, in the way you reach out without thinking when someone near you falters, and the way you let the small lights of kindness guide your ordinary days. The restless waters before dawn and the white silence of winter's fury taught you that survival was never about loud courage or grand gestures. It was about the shared cigarette passed in the rocking boat, the blanket tucked higher in the freezing dark, the hand that reached out when the mud pulled too hard in the tangled paths. These small acts of looking after one another became the quiet resilience that carried you through the long march through shattered lands, where the sorrow for what was broken walked beside the relief of progress and the simple mercy of offering bread to a stranger became a light that pushed back against the darkness. In those moments, the private fears that rose in the shadows of battle found less room to grow, eased by the presence of the man beside you and the knowledge that neither of you faced the unknown alone. When the guns finally fell silent and the ship rocked you home on the gentle tide, the sudden stillness brought both relief and a quiet grief for those who did not make it to that place of peace. The threshold of the familiar yet altered world welcomed you with the same embrace that once sent you away, yet the eyes that met yours saw the changes that could not be hidden and loved you anyway. At the table where stories often paused, the gap between those who waited and the one who returned was bridged not by explanations but by the warmth of the meal and the steady presence of family who did not need every shadow named to know that you were home. These small kindnesses, repeated in the quiet rituals of the garden and the walks at dusk, turned the ordinary days into a living tribute to the extraordinary bonds that had carried you through. The letters you wrote and received became the thin threads that kept home alive when the world felt far away, and now they rest as gentle reminders that survival was built from countless small lights of kindness and resilience flickering even in the darkest hours. The man who once shared your silence and your stories lives on in the way you tend the soil, in the way you pause when the wind moves a certain way, in the way you let the love that remains guide you through the soft closing of this unforgettable chapter. The private fears that once rose in the night have settled into something quieter, carried not as a weight but as a reminder of how much light can be found when people choose to stay close and to offer what they have without being asked. As the long night of war gives way to the gentle light of peace, the story of one ordinary soldier becomes the story of many, a quiet reminder that the road home was never walked alone. The small lights of human kindness, the steady presence of those who shared the burden, the letters that crossed the miles, and the rituals that keep memory alive have all woven together into the fabric of a life reclaimed. You sit now in the same light that once touched the envelope, and the chapter closes not with a loud ending but with the soft understanding that survival was never about what was taken away but about what was carried forward. The countless small acts of love and resilience that guided countless hearts safely back to the lives they had once left behind. In the enduring lesson that survival was built from countless small lights of kindness and resilience flickering even in the darkest hours, the quiet heroism of ordinary men and women becomes the truest story of how hearts find their way home. If the story of these small lights and the gentle ways they guided one ordinary soldier through an unforgettable chapter has moved something quiet inside you, you might find comfort in the free ebook The Shadow War, 5 top-secret operations that shaped World War II, along with weekly deep dives into forgotten personal stories and hidden acts of quiet heroism that explore the inner lives of those who carried such lights through the long night. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The garden continues to grow under hands that have learned to hold both memory and new life at the same time. The wind moves through the leaves with the same gentle rhythm it has always had, and the light falls across the table where the story began and where it now rests in quiet peace. You carry the photograph and the letters and the steady presence of all who walk beside you, and in the soft closing of this chapter the heart finds its gentle rest, knowing that the small lights of kindness and resilience will continue to guide the ordinary days ahead, just as they once guided you safely home.